immigrant group in the country.
All right. All right, let's kick this out. Welcome to Give Me a Break. Guys, how y'all doing today? Hope y'all are doing well. We got one more coming. He's going to be a little late, but we're here to talk about should the Democrats be prosecuted or persecuted or whatever words you want to use for all the rampant fraud that's occurring all over the nation. Wick is waiting on his backup, so I might back him up a little bit more, be a little more lenient to him than y'all, since there's three of y'all, one of him. Let's start with Tyler here. Give us a kickoff here.
Average debate enjoyer. I am back from like a 1 month hiatus. I have a cold right now. My Kuai background is so Kuai, and check me out on YouTube.
All right. Thank you so much, Fabian.
Yeah, I am Fabian Liberty. You can find me, just Google Fabian Liberty, I guess. You'll find me on YouTube and X. Do anarcho-capitalist content, libertarian objectivist content on my channel, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everybody that showed up on time. Ali, where are you at? So I appreciate you guys, and I'm excited for tonight. Should be fun.
To be fair to Ollie, it was work. He actually had these things to use. He's coming. All right, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Good One Motorsports. I'm an unreasonable man. You can find me at an unreasonable man on YouTube mostly. I also have a new channel called Gun Prattle, where we talk about, shockingly, guns all the time, 24/7. And
Nice.
It's really cool. So you should check that out as well. That's on Kick, Rumble, YouTube, all of it. It's on all of them. And yeah, it's going to be a good debate tonight. I think it's going to be fun.
All right, so it's our token lefty for today. We got Wick here to defend his Dems against the rampant fraud. What do you thoughts? How do you welcome in?
Well, I'm Wick. So, hi. You can find me at Wick TV on YouTube, Twitch, all that bullshit. Yeah. Are we doing opening statements, or we just?
Yeah, we can go backwards for openings.
Okay,
Go ahead and give us the opening. Yeah,
just
kick us off.
give you my opening thoughts on the subject at hand. Should Democrats be prosecuted or persecuted for all fraud everywhere? Obviously not. I think that there is obviously fraud that has been done, and the perpetrators of that fraud should be held accountable. I think that the people who have been prosecuted and convicted for fraud, crypto fraud, and all these things should not be pardoned by the Trump administration. That should not have happened, but it did. I am not here to defend Somalian fraud. Obviously, if you can prove it and there's evidence and you bring it forth to a court, that's all well and good. Have at it. But what I am here is to caution against this kind of veiled innuendo that often happens in these things, where people put out a YouTube video like Nick Shirley did that has incorrect facts, and then this prompts a lot of people to make a lot of assumptions. Look, there very well may be fraud in some of these places, but that Nick Shirley video didn't prove that. Now, again, I'm all for opening up investigations if you have solid evidence, but this idea that Democrats are the party of fraud and they're doing all the fraud everywhere and that they're all looking the other way, I just don't think that the facts support that claim. That's my position. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Grid. Go ahead, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, just from my worldview, I think that it's obviously there's a due process. The due process needs to be followed. Ought we prosecute Democrats if they're responsible for this? Absolutely. Should they be held accountable? Absolutely. I guess the court of public opinion is not as relevant to me as maybe it is to some others. I just really don't care. I'm waiting to see if any charges, if charges will get filed and how far up the ladder they're going to go. We know that for this type of fraud to have occurred, it has to go pretty high. My concern is that the wagons are going to get circled, and Walz will never get prosecuted. If he had supposedly he's had a part in it, anybody else that's had a part in it above just the base level of junior Democrat Party guy is never going to see the inside of a courtroom. I would have the same problem if it was a Republican or anybody really. But I think the Democrats have especially finessed this system out, And what I've seen, the facts that I've been presented thus far seem to point to industrial level fraud on the American taxpayer. And yeah, absolutely, somebody should pay for that with blood, sweat, and tears. So that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Fabian.
Yeah, so I'm gonna. I have so much I want to say on this. Let me try and condense it. So first and foremost, we're here, to talk about the Somalian fraud because it's in the court of public opinion, as you said, right? Because this Nick Shirley video went viral. But this is, obviously it was, citizen journalism, doesn't have the same connections and the same, standards as does, major media publications, which have been for 20 years. We've been seeing how they put out nothing but garbage and misinformation and lies constantly, right? It's so funny when someone's like, well, the New York Times, it's like, oh, okay, so you read misinformation. Cool. We're talking about this because fraud is rampant throughout the entirety of the United States. And the welfare system in and of itself is designed for fraud. That is why it is made. It is not made to help poor people, right? And we know this. And I can prove this to you unequivocally, very simply. And the way I can prove this to you is that we spend $1.4 trillion in the last year on welfare systems as a whole. And there are 19.8 million American households that are defined as poverty or poor. If we were to take that money and redistribute it with no welfare systems, no daycare clinic gets this, NGO gets this to build housing, no TANF food stamps, landlords get kickbacks, all these other programs. We get rid of all these programs and we simply redistribute this money. Every single one of those 19.8 million poor families would get $70,000 a year in a check from the government. $70,000 a year. The money's not going to poor people. They are breadcrumbs of a system that is designed to buy votes, to enrich and to enrich the wealthy elite as they use programs and philanthropy and NGOs and their preferred vendors and bureaucracy to bleed the middle class out of existence. Welfare in and of itself, these Democrats, absolutely, of course they should go to jail, right? If what we're hearing from the congressional committee hearing today, where they were threatening people that were whistleblowers, where they were telling whistleblowers that they were going to lose their job, the claim, if those claims are true, that they were asking them in interviews when they attempted to whistleblow, well, I need to know where your kids go to school and I need to know where you drop them off and pick them up on the school bus if you want to be a whistleblower. Where we are having, all of these things shut down, where the DHS in Minnesota transferred from criminal proceedings and hearings and then changed the word fraud to overbilling to determine whether or not maybe they overbilled and we should get some of that money back instead of investigating fraud. This has been a rampant system. And the reason it's rampant and the reason we're talking about it isn't just Nick Shirley. It's just Minnesota is a special case because it's the Somalians. And because it's the Somalians, the average IQ of a Somalian is 70, right? 1 out of 6 Somalians has a functional IQ of someone with Down syndrome. They're over 87% of them are on some form of welfare. And it ties with the immigration issues that we are discussing, where people are talking about people from third world countries with horrific cultures like that in Somalia, where they're tribal. And it isn't, and this isn't a black thing, right? Somalia, because of their tribal culture, obviously Africans tend to have a lower IQ than Europeans and Asians and Jews, etc. But it is specific to Somalia because their tribal culture has created inbreeding for, over 200 years. And so they're the most ethnically and genetically homogenous country in the world, right? So there's a lot of inbreeding, and there's an incredibly low IQ, and they're really bad at the fraud. And it's because only 1 out of 40 of them has the intellect of an average American, right? The other 39 out of 40 are dumber than the average American. 1 out of 6 roughly are going to be equivalent to IQ as someone with Down syndrome. And the average person is going to be 2 standard deviations below the mean, which is, highly predictive of criminal behavior, of an inability to be a functioning member of society. Obviously there will be breakaways. Obviously some people are going to be intelligent. Obviously some people are just going to have a good heart and they're going to be hard workers despite the fact that they have a low IQ. But as a whole, as a community, they are deeply, deeply not incapable of being able to being able to articulate their positions or engage in critical thinking. And that's why you see things like Leering Center. And that's why the fraud is so blatantly obvious and easy to discover, because they simply lack the intellect to be able to engage in fraud in a way that isn't obvious upon just an initial inspection. And so obviously there's fraud everywhere. Obviously the system is designed to enrich the wealthy elite, and there is fraud. Obviously the consequence of this is the destruction of the middle class. And I think welfare, this is a prime time to really showcase that what welfare really is. It is a eugenics program designed to decrease the fertility and birth rate of white middle class people in America, squeeze them out to where they can't afford homes, they can't afford businesses, they can't afford to compete with the wealthy elite, and to increase the breeding and the voting power and the political power of those at the very bottom of society, to create a two-tiered system where the wealthy elite can engage in ruling over the rest of us. And it's not a feature, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And I hope people begin to realize this by seeing the absurdity and the deep levels of corruption in Minnesota fraud scandal that we have today.
I just want you all to know, before we went live, I actually started a polling bet with a few people. And
Was this like the director's extended cut version of an opening statement? What's going on?
I guess, yeah, I guess. But that's not even the part I wanted to take a bet on. So I took a bet, and the bet was with about 10 people, and we gave odds, and I put it through my little algorithm, over how long it would take before IQ came up. And my bet was at 20 minutes. And about 4 or 5 people said we wouldn't get past opening, so it looks like I lost some money. Thank you, Fabian, for bringing IQ up within 12 minutes. My money was also on Grid to bring it up, so I didn't hit the parlay either.
I was
so,
damn, you didn't even hit the parlay.
The main argument.
Are we doing let's
go to Tyler. Go ahead, Tyler. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler. I know you do. Go ahead.
That monologue.
Oh, don't you worry. I'm about to get to a lot of it. So.
Yeah.
All right. So starting with social well, or actually, let's start with. Can we start with the Somalis first? I'm going to stand up for my Nubian brothers and sisters here.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Say that the Somalis that come to the United States do so with compassion-based immigration. If we want to, in an hour or two, get to an argument over compassion versus merit-based immigration, we can. But that's the reason they hear. People generally like a small percentage of our immigration being based around compassion and not all based off of merit. Otherwise, it actually would hurt merit. But the reason of these people being here go from some of the lowest IQ, lowest earners in the first generation to see the most massive jump in the second generation. They essentially become acclimated. And unlike most of the work visas we have come to the United States, they stay. They stay long term. They live here generationally, and they actually assimilate long term. Whereas, again, we bring in more workers based off of merit. Those workers take that money and they send it back home to their families where they actually want to live long term. So generally having these people here is a good. Pigeonholing 70, 80 cases of fraud to an entire population of people and using it as an excuse to attack them on completely unrelated subjects is why the accusation of racism keeps getting thrown around. We can criticize these people doing fraud. I'm going to go a different route with it. I'm going to say this is the par for the course of what we see with the Democratic Party taking funding, giving it to NGOs, and receiving kickbacks for it. They receive kickbacks in all of their campaigns. Ilhan Omar wrote the Meals Act. She introduced it herself, and that was the exact policy that was used to create this fraud, and the fraud was going on by people that were contributing to her campaign before she even wrote the act, long before they got their money. So it does show that they were in bed together. I don't think we're ever going to get that concrete link. Just like the Buffalo Billion, just like other instances of fraud with like in California where I think like $10 billion is unaccounted for. We're not going to see arrests anywhere but like it stops at the chief of staff. You're not going to see Cuomo arrested for the Buffalo Billion. You're not going to see Newsom arrested. You don't see Chris Christie arrested when he shut down that bridge. You see his top people get arrested. So we're never going to see the heads that we want from this. But at the end of the day, the democratic abuse of NGOs is probably the biggest story here. They got kickbacks from almost all these groups, well, major groups, not every individual instance. But all these major groups that were doing the fraud were donating to the campaigns of the people pushing the policy, and then still to the people defending them today. YouTubers going in and doing amateur reporting probably hurt the story more than it helped it. That guy probably did more harm than good at the end of the day. The only thing I got from that video was that somebody was yelling, "It's ICE! It's ICE!" Like, we can suddenly evade federal law enforcement doing their constitutionally obligated job and not open the door while we're receiving federal funds? Fuck that. You hear it's ICE, you better open that motherfucking door. You get our federal money. That's all I got.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, and so we will talk about the smelly fraud. I'm going to turn it over to Wick because I know he's going to have umbrance with a bunch of what y'all said. However, we're going to talk about a lot of the fraud. There seems to be a lot of fraud. So let's start with the smelly fraud and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Wick. Kick us off.
Well, so first of all, I'm not entirely. My problem with this is this seems to be a vehicle that people are using to kind of wedge in other issues there, because we're not talking about fraud specifically here. And I think that Fabian Liberty brought up a whole bunch of things where he wants to attack the welfare state as a whole through this. A lot of people, and I'm not saying anyone here is doing this, but a lot of people want to attack immigration as a whole through this. And a lot of people
They're kind of
want
inexorably
to
tied to this story, though, right?
yeah, but if I may finish, right? Like, it's being tied to the story. Like, we can look at the biggest case of fraud in America, at least in recent history, and that's the PPP loans, right? Back in 2021, we had over some reports, if you include the EIDC stuff in there, like the emergency defense thing, it gets up to 200 billion. That dwarfs the amount of fraud that we do here. But no one talks about that because they can't use it to go after their favorite bugaboo, immigrants, right? But because it is
libertarian here, we love shitting on the PPP loans.
Here's the thing.
Let Wick finish. Let Wick finish.
And I'll let you guys go. I promise, right? But my whole premise here, okay, is twofold. One, that this is being used as a vehicle to attack immigrants, and the same attention isn't being paid to the other types of fraud that are going on, right? And I think it's very telling that that's the case. And two, right, that when we have a media ecosystem that accused a Capitol Police officer of being the Jan 6 pipe bomber based on a gate analysis that the Blaze TV did, and it turns out they were totally wrong. They got the wrong person. So one, you have the whole story about Haitians in Ohio stealing pets to eat the cats and the dogs. Turned out to be totally false, pushed by J.D. Vance. It was wrong. When you have people who falsely accused the Palestinian student of being the Brown shooter, right, and killing those 11 or 12 students at the Brown shooting, and it turns out that that was totally wrong. At what point do we stop taking these people seriously when they continuously, every time it seems, get things wrong? When do we start saying that's all bullshit? Now, again, like I said, there very well may be fraud at these places. If you find it, prosecute it. I don't still see evidence from the Shirley video.
But before Fabian gets started, I got just a couple of things. First, I don't think that the whole welfare is the issue. I don't think Fabian was saying that. I didn't get that at all from what he said. It's just this system is designed to be abused, and these people abused it, and that seems to be the fact since people are being prosecuted for that. You're welcome to say that the YouTube guy calling attention to it is wrong. That's fine. But I don't believe that you can say that if people are being prosecuted for it, that it probably didn't happen. I don't see where we get A to B. And I really got to take, I got to.
Did I say that though? Did I say that there was?
You literally said welfare state is not the issue. Welfare is not the issue. And Fabian going after bringing it up is not.
Because hold on, Fabian said that it was designed to decrease the fertility rate of white people.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Yes.
do you think that's true?
Money.
Do you think the welfare system was designed to increase the fertility rate of white people?
I didn't care about the white people part. I only cared about the money part that we're actually talking about.
That's what I was responding to, just to be clear.
I mean, I'm focused on the topic.
Well, hold on. Let me reframe this. I'm gonna play the Trump soothsayer because I feel like I do that a lot now because for whatever reason, maybe they're good or bad. But so I know we're gonna talk about this on Friday on Wix. Check it out; it's gonna be good. But we're going to the administration has been pushing a larger narrative, and the narrative is that not only is it immigration, but it's kind of what Tyler was alluding to with the NGOs going out, and then it's coming back in and funding their campaign, and then they're using immigrants to like have illegal voting, and they get the welfare, and they basically are shipping in the voting. That's the argument that they're making. Like, does anybody here see evidence of that?
But I don't think that was Wick's point.
I know that's not Wick's point.
Yeah. But before we get too far into that, a couple of things. What Tyler talked about. So I'm going to take a little bit of issue with the first generation Somali glow up that you're trying to push. Yeah, look, the difference between working at a car wash and working at McDonald's is not a great leap there, pal. So I mean, I just don't. I mean, you can't make that. Look, these guys aren't working on Wall Street, brother. Like you're trying to make it sound like they make this great generational leap. But again, I just don't see how you're getting there.
Multiple people doing the fraud were doctors. This is silly.
I don't believe that. I don't know. I don't believe that that's true. I think you've smoked a little too much wacky weed today. Second,
No,
I don't really care that Omar
like that
sponsored-
the case of that judge threw out because it was quote circumstantial evidence, even though the state, even though that's all cases on fraud are basically circumstantial evidence, because like circumstantial evidence is everything other than direct eyewitness testimony, right? So financial records are circumstantial evidence. That case that kind of went viral because the judge threw it out. The individual in that case that defrauded the Medicare system was a doctor, right? So many of the people that were involved in the Medicare fraud are doctors, right? It's there are plenty of doctors that are committing the fraud as well.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that Tyler was trying to put this great spin on it that these Somalis come over and then the first generation, the next thing you know, they're like they're airline pilots for Delta or something, and I just don't buy that at all. The Ilhar Omar bill, I don't really care about.
Some of them do.
I understand that was fraud, but what I did care about, what I did find really interesting was the low level arrest. Yes, you're right. You're 100% right, and that echoes kind of what I said about where we know that there's obviously fraud, right? I mean, the money's gone. They don't know where it went. There's obviously fraud. You're correct, I believe, that nobody above a certain level is going to get touched. That's how politics in this country operate. But it kind of plays to the prompt of ought they not be prosecuted? Should there be a political force field around these people?
Can I just
go
ask
ahead,
directly what your evidence is that Ilhan Omar, Tim Walz, or any of the big people that you want prosecuted? What's your evidence that they were?
I didn't say who I wanted prosecuted.
We're not going to find it.
Can I finish my question? Either engaged in fraud or that they knew about the fraud and did nothing. Because I have evidence, right, that Tim Walz specifically put forth, what was it? Quite a bit of money in 2019 in order to add funding for new investigators, data analytics, fraud tracking at DHS, tighten oversight at CCAP, right? Like they took steps, and you can argue that they weren't enough, but they took steps to combat these frauds. And I do also want to point out that the arrests made and most of the convictions, 90% of the convictions that happened were Democrats prosecuting and convicting these people.
I don't know.
This is under the Biden administration.
That's directed at you. You keep saying there's obviously fraud that the Democrats are doing.
Well, sure.
Okay.
So you literally just said that there are people that were prosecuted for it. Who were those? Were those people Democrat or Republican that were prosecuted?
Do you think that Ilhan Omar is engaged in fraud?
I didn't make that claim. He made that claim, and I said I didn't care about it.
Okay.
Well, I didn't make that claim specifically. I mean, she has since 2019 increased her net worth by 66,676%, and her husband has beaten Warren Buffett on the stock market every year since then, which is interesting, right? But I mean, like not atypical of politicians to be engaged in corruption and fraud. They're all corrupt, right? Like if you're voting for a politician, it's a corrupt piece of shit thief that should probably be killed and drawn and quartered publicly for the crimes that they've committed against the American people.
Just so I'm aware of your all's takes here, I'll just ask directly: who here thinks that Tim Walz or Ilhan Omar or any of the ones senators, House Representatives, have engaged in fraud here? Who thinks that?
just like speculates
engaged in
it, or
fraud?
No,
can
who
prove
has
it?
evidence for that?
Oh, we're not going to get evidence.
I mean, if I had
Okay.
evidence, I'd have
Well,
already
No
turned it in.
evidence. Okay.
Well, there's.
I mean,
would've
so
already-
the Senate,
There's no
the
investigation
congressional,
yet.
the
Because I'll
congressional
just
committee.
speak to you that some of the Democrats at the state level obviously did.
Did anybody listen to the
fraud,
congressional
yes.
committee today, other than me?
I looked
I
at the
did.
highlights. I was busy
I was
today.
watching-
I unfortunately
Okay.
was busy.
All right,
also.
so
we
if you-
just
if you
started
watch-
Hold on.
investigating.
Right.
Look,
If you watched it at all today, right, then obviously there's no smoking gun of like Tim Walz or any of these people signing a document saying that like there is no smoking gun as of right now. And I highly doubt that they'll find one, even if they did a genuine, thorough investigation. What we do know, right, is that Tim Walz put money forward to it was $5 million to have additional investigations into fraud. We know that. We know that he took some level of action. We also know that the lieutenant governor, and a lot of these people were getting a lot of check blue money from the very organizations that were some of which are accused, some of which were prosecuted for fraud. We know that the administration in their process and the Waltz administration changed with that $5 million. They changed the DHS in Minnesota from specifically targeting and trying to investigate fraud to overbilling, and created committees to try and recoup money to some degree. And so while they put in more money for investigation, they moved away very much from criminal investigations into going through documents and being like, hey, can we recoup some of this money? Is that tacit support or not? It's like a lot more investigation is going to have to go through to what level to what level they were complicit in specific stealing, fraud, right? That is not necessarily my overarching argument. I agree with you, your characterizations, Wick, of my argument. I don't need to be defended against those characterizations because they're not mischaracterizations. I agree that people are tying this to immigration and to Somalians specifically. I agree that people are tying this to welfare. I think that is good, and I think that they are inexorably linked. And I think it is a very I think it is a debate bro tactic to try and isolate what is happening and what is occurring from the overarching problems of the welfare state and from immigration policy to try and say, no, we just need to focus specifically on is this one daycare center, do we have the evidence to prove that this is fraud or not fraud, when we do have a ballooning welfare state that is putting the middle class into inexorable amounts of debt and
Yeah, I'm gonna-
destroying this country.
Just real quick.
Before you, go ahead,
Oh,
Wick.
sorry.
After Wick goes, I'm gonna get Ollie in here to give an intro.
Yeah,
real
of
quick.
course.
Go ahead.
When you say the welfare state, are you including Medicare, Medicaid, stuff like that?
I'm including all of it, right? So I would
Okay,
include
so-
farming subsidies.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
include.
I got you.
I would include all of them.
I
Social
understand.
Security, right?
Yeah. So almost all of that 1.4 trillion you mentioned that going toward the
Mhm.
quote unquote welfare state goes to old people, right? It a vast majority goes to caring for old people specifically. So if we want to look at the problem with this, right? It isn't daycare centers or welfare as a whole to working class individuals, right? It's
No, I disagree with that.
the vast majority of it goes towards old people and the healthcare for old people.
Yeah, no, I disagree with that characterization. When you have, according to the,
Well, am I
to the
wrong?
committee today, we have well, you said right that that you wanted me to agree to you saying that the issue is old people and not fraud or welfare system in general. That is you're correct that the boomers are the major recipients of the welfare state. That doesn't magically mean that fraud in Minnesota at the conservative estimate of $9 billion, which is more than we've sent to Israel in aid since the beginning of October 7th, is somehow not an issue, right? Both are an issue. The
both things can
redistribution
be true at
towards
the same
poor
time.
boomers,
Well-
right? Like I don't care. Like
but this
I
is the
made the
trick.
assertion.
This is
I
the
know it's not a trick. There's
It
no
is,
trick.
because you say
What
we
trick?
can't focus on one thing, and then I try to make a more holistic argument, and you're like, well, we have to see he's dodging from focusing on
Let's-
this one thing. What are you doing,
That's
man?
not a trick. That's not a trick. You're trying to use what I attacked you on and reverse Uno it,
Okay.
but you're failing because it's just
Let's
not
let's
true.
let's.
What I'm saying is the meta argument is very simple. $1.4 trillion being spent. If that money was simply redistributed to the poor, that would be $70,000 for every household in America that is defined as poor. If you're not poor, you don't need government assistance, whether or not you're fucking young or old.
We're going to come back to that in a second because I actually have something I want to bring up in a moment about that. But let's get all in here, and then you can go ahead and give us an intro and your thoughts on if we should prosecute Democrats for widespread fraud.
Yeah, man, the first thing I want to say is fuck everyone for making me watch that Nick Shirley video. Jesus, that kid is the most annoying, insufferable kid. And but okay, your question. When you say Dems, like, I don't know what you like. Democrats in Minnesota? Do you mean like Tim Walz? What do you mean by Dems? Because no, I've seen people run scams in all, red states, blue states. It doesn't necessarily matter.
Well, if you want me to answer that, I'll answer that and I'll let you go back. But like, so I guess where I'm coming from is when I try to do the shows, I try to bring like what I hear from my normies friends, right? This is like what they're saying, and I try to bring it here, and I like to have our internet brain boys come and argue about whatever the normies think is happening, right? And the conspiracy theory that I'm hearing, whether or not it's conspiracy theory or not, is it's pretty widespread, but the idea is they're bringing people here, they're spending our tax dollars on them, they're using it to like get people elected, and then it goes all the way to the top. In fact, we can look, Walz was behind all this, and look, he was the VP candidate, so the whole Democratic Party's evil, and we need to, I don't know, tear them down brick by brick. That is like an argument that I'm seeing.
Everything you just said doesn't require fraud, by the way.
Sure, but I understand that. I understand that. Right. But their argument is that is the fraud, is the kicker.
I'm just pointing out all of the things that you stated.
I know.
Importing people from other countries, giving them resources, saying that we're the ones that we're going to help you, giving them a bunch of aid.
Sure.
None of that requires any fraud whatsoever. For that Fabian, conspiracy to be true.
Hold on, but Fabian,
without any fraud.
Well, okay, well, then let me give you some of the more fringe parts of the conspiracy. Oh, Melissa Hortman, well, she knew she was killed by someone with Walz connections, right? He knew it was murder, it was assassin, right? Like, there's like it goes pretty widespread down the QAnon. No one's saying that. I'm not saying that either. I'm just bringing this up because I feel like it's a topic that's not being discussed in the way I think it should be, which is that it's like an internet, like a nasty onion, and they're all in cahoots. But let me
really important that I pointed out.
Sure, let Ollie finish. Let Ollie finish, and we'll open it back up again. Go ahead, Ollie.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I hear all that. That argument never makes sense to me. The idea that that Democrat politicians are immigrating people in to win votes, and then it's to their own detriment, right? If this is at the end of the day racism, it's to their own detriment. Their white people are losing out, right? And they're hearing you because Gavin Newsom is he's cozying up to the Groypers. He's posting his old school badass basketball photos. He has his white family on for he's mogging on JD Vance. So we got all that going on. All I'm saying is for this, I haven't seen anyone necessarily defend this, right? Everyone I've seen who's watched this video, all the Democrats I've seen have been like, if there's fraud, prosecute, get it the fuck out of here. So when you say should Dems be held liable, the only way I see them held liable is potentially it's easier to scam in a democratic state because they have better social social nets and social policies. So it's easier. Maybe if you want to go towards negligence, if you want to go towards something like that, I can agree with there on negligence potentially, right? But the biggest concern I've heard is that people were concerned. The Democrats were covering this up for concerns of racism, right? Because they were concerned that people would call them racist. But then in the video and even in the reviews I've seen, Democrats did try to they reviewed a few people of these licenses. They took some of these licenses down. I mean, they were shutting these people down for certain failures. A couple of them were failures to some of the kids weren't vaccinated. Some of the workers weren't vaccinated, right? All these things. So they were, in there and investigating and doing all that. So maybe negligence.
You laid out the trick. You laid out the trick that Democrats are doing, right? What they're doing is they're saying, of course, fraud is bad. Of course. Hold on. Right. Yeah. You laid out the trick. They go, of course, fraud is bad. Of course, these things.
Fair.
And then when people are like, well, then we need to shut this shit down and fix it. They go, but Trump shutting down the money in the stem of the flow that is rampant with fraud is making children starve, and it's evil. And so I don't think they'll tell you to your face that we should prosecute the fraud. I don't think they're supporting the system that incentivizes massive amounts of fraud.
It's not smart to just shut down all of the fucking system overnight, right? Just because you find out
is.
for fraud.
That is the
On a
right
Mind
thing
you,
to do.
mind you,
On a
this isn't
YouTube
even fraud.
video.
This
Hold on.
the
One at a
Nick
time,
Shirley
one at a
video
time.
isn't new.
Hold on.
The Nick Shirley video isn't new. In 2000, like I think a few years ago, they were doing reviews on this. CNN was doing reviews on this. Like this isn't new, right? Like I'm not saying that it's good or that we should let it go, but you can't just shut shit down overnight because of a YouTube.
Yeah, fraud
video.
has always existed. What's
Yeah.
new is the ever increasing amounts of fraud and the ever increasing amounts of this community having the balls of Democrat politicians tightly grasped to the point that they're doing mea culpas about the
See, I don't even
racism
think
of
it's
Trump
Democrat
and
politicians.
talking about like, oh, I grew up Jewish, so I know what it's like to be bullied in the neighborhood,
think
and they're
it's the
sitting there
politicians, or
laughing
do you
in their
think-
fucking face, going,
Yes, I think it's politicians.
as they're stealing money
wait,
from
do
them,
you think it's
wearing
politicians?
$2,000 glasses,
do think it's
making up shit about their
politicians.
daycares
Hold on,
and they're
let's-
getting
hold on,
broken
let's-
into.
Let's go to Grid. Grid, what do you think is possible?
Wait, Grid,
Grid,
real
okay,
quick,
go
let me
ahead.
just give you a bounce off real quick. You'll play off of it. So like it's either politicians, which I don't think it's like Tim Walz approving this. Rather, I think it's people within the community who maybe got like work within like a local, not necessarily government, but you know those like assistants. These are people who probably went to school. They know how to work the program, so they're doing the cover ups. I think it's an inter community thing, right? I don't necessarily think it's politicians that are doing it.
Nah, they're too
That's
stupid
kinda what
to be
I'm
able to pull it off to this degree.
That's a great point, but I'm gonna put this to Wick and Fabian because I these guys are each gonna have a different opinion on this. And I think I know which way it's gonna go. So if it's the case, Wick, that Walz did all of these, which I believe it is, that he'd put all of these task force in place, he tried to get the enforcement up, he did all of
Listening, I'm
those
just grabbing
things.
a
If that's the case, why is it that the only actual investigations and prosecutions have come from the national government and not the state government?
Well, I think
Because they're federal loans that the people have, right?
just-
A lot of it's
Well,
some federal money.
But the state can prosecute for fraud in their state.
And to be clear, a lot of them kicked it up to the FBI when they realized that the scope was probably beyond their resources, right? We would just cede to me, right, that the federal government has more resources.
I think you could assume that happened. I don't think there's
Correct?
any
Is
evidence
that true?
that happened.
There is for the major case, the autism case. There's documented evidence that Keith Ellison and the state government worked with the federal government for that like big one. I think it was
Yeah,
like
I mean, and
hundreds of millions.
And I can't
so
give
one
you
out
every
of, like,
single case
1,000?
of fraud that happened and whether or not and how the state government worked with the federal government. It's beyond the scope of what my answer can be to you. However, I can say that in the instances, if you find instances where state government actively obstructed the federal government's investigation of these things, I'm for prosecuting that or holding them accountable. But what
Okay.
I haven't seen is evidence that that's the case. And
Would-
that's what I'm asking you. Do
would-
you have evidence
would-
that the
Okay.
state
Well,
someone
hold-
at the state level obstructed
Hold on.
the federal government?
What would
In
ta-
March of
like-
2025, a federal judge found Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, was not telling the truth. That means he was lying about stopping payments on these to these nonprofits. That he said that he did, but he in fact did not. And a federal judge found that to be true. And there were claims of racism that were made, and the case was thrown out. Now, whether or not you agree with that, that is the facts, right? I don't give a shit whether you agree with it. That's the facts. It happened.
Well, the case got
this,
thrown out.
and this again, you can't.
Hold on, when you say the
I'm
case was
just
thrown out, what do
asking
you mean?
if you want to say that the Democrats at the state level or even the federal level they want the same things the Republicans want, and they're trying to do a good job. You cannot prove it, or you've not been able to prove it. I don't have to prove that anybody that commits fraud should be charged with fraud. I don't care what party they are. But what we have is a proven arc of Democrats in positions to regulate these programs, repeatedly either failing to do their job, which fire them or maybe put them in jail if it's criminally negligent, or in the damn programs, that's best option, or admit that Democrats cover for each other and they're just not going to go to fucking jail.
Well, you said that he was found the facts of a case that got thrown out.
Yes, he was
And that's what
found.
I'm asking.
A federal
What
judge
do you
found he
mean
was
by
not telling
thrown
the
out. Do you
truth.
mean that
That's
the case
lying.
was found in favor of Tim Walz?
It was not found in favor of Tim Walz. A federal judge found that Tim Walz was not telling the truth about
Then why was the case
stopping
thrown out?
payments to these nonprofits that were defrauding the government. In
So
fact,
why was
Go
the
ahead.
case thrown out that you're referring
Wait,
to? Why was
he
it
did
thrown out?
because there
perjury?
were claims of racism made and the case was thrown out.
Well, let me
So you
ask.
think that? Oh, hold on.
Go
So
ahead.
just to be clear, because someone said that the case was racist, the case got thrown out.
No, they filed. I know what he's talking about. They filed a racial suit against the state for persecution against the Somali community, and it held up the investigation on the state level that was being done.
So was the case thrown out?
Racist.
I think that it didn't get settled in time, and the federal government stepped in and took over. I don't think we saw a conclusion.
So,
to it.
I think that
Well, the
so
federal judge has
I
already
guess
been
It
hold
was
on.
halted at best. I think halted.
Let me just pause this because I think we're going down a little bit rabbit hole. Like, what is the like? And this is the same question I know I've got asked for like the Trump stuff when he got convicted and all these stuff, and I said it was a witch hunt and whatever. Like, I guess we're at a point now. It seems like, what is the standard that y'all are going to accept as like, what did you say, interfering with the case? Would it be like, oh, someone is going to go get testimony about fraud happening and they get fired the day before they're supposed to give? Or would it be like, oh, they're doing this like race case where they're using lawfare? What is like the standard for interference? Let's go to the left.
That's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy to answer though for you. Like it's like any email that says like giving them some sort of tips on order how to get away with what they're doing. Any coordination saying, "Hey, we're going to give you this money. Make sure you donate back to us."
Any
anything-
tangible involvement
Yeah.
between one and the other. It's going to be
It's
any
pretty
involvement,
simple.
really. If
Do we
if
have
I don't
any
know
of
any
that?
of the other people in politics, but
Yeah.
if Tim Walz was talking to any of the daycares, right? If there's any email between like
Yeah, do
any
we
of the
have any of that?
politicians.
Do we have any?
There's enough
evidence that any
smoke.
of that
There's
happened?
more than enough smoke to merit the investigation
Well,
that just started.
So like,
So-
okay. As far as I know, growing up in Dearborn, large Lebanese community, we had this thing called Access, right? It was people who didn't necessarily work in the government, but they would help. They knew enough English and they were here long enough. Maybe they were second generation, third generation people, and they would help like non-English speaking people like fill out forms for businesses, fill out forms for so on and so forth. Like, why does it
And
have
to
to be that
vote.
the
Don't
well,
forget
and to vote
voting.
what?
In
How to
Minnesota,
vote,
you
whatever,
can
where to
vouch
vote,
for
so on and
someone,
so forth.
even if they don't have an ID or any proof of residence. Up to 7
Oh,
people.
well, if this whistleblower
Yeah, I don't-
accusation,
But I'm saying like
get
there are probably,
verified.
it's
Hold
probably
on.
more likely that there are these resources in like Minneapolis, right, where there is like a center for like Somali people that can go to help them file these papers. It's more likely that that group would be like involved in the fraud than people that are like finagling. Because with a lot of these daycares, it was they said in the video it would say like 2 daycares were run out of the same place, but really it showed like there was a daycare in 2022 and 2023, and then it changed names, or it seemed to have changed names in 2024 and 2025. So it just it seems like it doesn't
several
seem.
of them were shut down, right? They
So-
came
Some of them
in,
were
they
shut down and then
hold
they
on,
reopened
hold on,
under a
hold on.
different name. Yeah,
Yeah, they would get investigated for committing fraud,
yeah,
and then they would shut down.
yes,
They would wait a month or two. They'd reopen,
different name.
different name, same owner, I assume, or
100%.
maybe change, maybe the wife instead of the
Yeah, we
husband.
see corporations do this all the time.
Yeah, corporate.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this isn't. I mean, that's what's called fraud.
100%. Yeah, I know. I'm not saying there
Okay,
not
so-
fraud happening. I'm
so-
saying I don't think it's the politicians
hold on.
enabling the fraud. That's kind of
Okay,
what I'm
so-
saying.
so I was asked-
Politicians have to enable it because they're the ones that signed off on it.
Let's
They're
go
the
to
ones
Tyler
that-
if maybe.
They,
Go
they
ahead,
could be
Tyler.
getting
Hold on, hold
frauded. They're getting scammed as well.
Tyler, go ahead.
The question at the end of the day, whistleblowers can be verified in any way. That's enough proof to prove they were culpable. But I kind of want to go like back to what Wick was saying earlier with the old people being the majority of spending with the programs. The boomers are getting there now. Scott wants to get rid of the state, but democracy is very in favor of these social programs, especially Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and things like that. So we need to
It's
grow
not
the
an
state.
argument against my claim to just say
It's not, but it's
didn't
what they
attack me
want.
for being an ANCAP, right? Yeah, but you're
I
not.
don't know,
You're
I'm
not
just,
actually
that's what
attacking.
people want. We have
No,
to
no,
be
no,
practical.
okay, yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't give
attacking.
a-
I'm
I
just
don't-
saying we have to be
What you were
practical.
doing, what you are doing is you are using that as a vector to attack my ideology instead of the claim that I am making. And the claim that I am making is that $1.4 trillion spent on welfare is redistributed to the poor whether they are elderly or not,
I get that.
would result in $70,000 a year in
Sure.
funds to those
I
people.
understand that,
And
but
if
the
you're
point is,
and so if you're
maybe
making
I'm mistaken.
70 plus 30, you ought to be able to afford your fucking medical
point is
expenses.
But maybe I'm mistaken. We aren't here to argue the welfare state. We're here to argue fraud.
yeah,
I
that's
am
the-
110% here to argue
they're
that this
Hold
is with
back.
inexorably linked, and that this is a feature, not a bug. That what is occurring in Minnesota is occurring throughout the entire country, and that what we're and that the welfare system is a system that is designed to strangle the middle class, and in part, in my opening statement, as I stated, is a eugenics program to ensure that high IQ, productive, conscientious people that are predominantly going to be white people here in America. If we were in fucking China, it would probably predominantly be Chinese people, to keep them from creating businesses, owning homes, having large families, and to create a two-tiered system of imported, low IQ, poor people that are constantly fighting for breadcrumbs from the government, while the wealthy elite and corporations steal all our fucking
this
money.
is what I'm trying to
I am here to
address. You
argue
guys just
that.
won't let me finish a sentence.
I have
Trying to get
evidence of
into this.
every one of
Hold
those
on.
fucking claims.
Hold on, I'm trying to get into this because your framing is a little wild. But again, most people want these social programs, so we have to think of a practical way to do it. So I'm trying to explain why we need compassion-based immigration.
Yeah,
If we
redistribute
look
the
at-
money.
Hold on. If
Just
we look,
redistribute the money.
it
Are you
doesn't work.
poor?
People don't want money handed to them. We're giving money away to give the government to get the government to do things for them. Here, take our
You
money
sure
and
about
build
that?
roads. Yes.
You sure? You
Yes.
sure that if I go to a random poor person out on the street and say, "Would you rather have all of the government programs that you have right now, or would you rather get $70,000 a year in a paycheck?"
No, I'm not sure if you go to
Well,
a single
just-
anecdotal person and ask them, but if you
just-
go to the
I
majority
didn't say
of the
anecdotal.
country,
Let's do
Hold on,
let's
hold
do
on,
a
hold
if
on.
you
Let
go to
me-
the majority
let me
of the
just-
country, yes,
Let me
these
just
programs are
hold
very
on.
popular.
Let me just reframe this a little bit. Really, like to Fabian's point on 70K, we don't have to use that example, right? I think another example that's in the news right now, we have the alleged fraud in California that's up potentially 250 billion.
Ohio too, yeah.
yeah. But well, I will do the math on one of them. So, $250 billion allegedly spent in California, right? So I did the math, right? That's about $750 per person could have gone in your pocket, like, right? And so now
So
we don't have the proof yet that it's happened. There's no proof, but in my mind, to your point, like, what's better? Is it you have the check or you don't
Well,
have?
yeah,
I think that's the argument
let me
he's
explain
making.
something.
You don't
Let me
agree with
just
that?
give you an example.
I agree. That's the argument.
They had a California, Los Angeles, sorry, San Francisco. I apologize. San Francisco had a housing program, right? And there was a wonderful kind of like I forget the guy's name. He's a YouTuber turned real estate mogul that like does like financial things. You know, and like his big claim to fame is that like he doesn't raise rents on people because he makes more money by not raising rents. Because if you have a good tenant, why raise their rent and gamble with like them leaving and then getting a new tenant that might be super shitty? That it's just more profitable for him to keep the rent the same and not raise rents. So he saw this program that San Francisco put forward. And what the program was is it was supposed to turn units or buildings that weren't necessarily you know, single family housing, or they were really big houses, into duplexes. And this is an expedited process. And what ended up happening is he spent a bunch of money to turn it into an apartment building, or like an apartment or a little small house for someone, right? He went through the inspection. There was a $15 item. The inspector didn't want to wait, so he had to get a new inspection. Upon the new inspection, they said that, oh, actually, you need to pay one of our approved lenders to use a camera and go through your sewage line to make sure that everything's good. So then he had to wait a couple weeks. He paid for that. Then they said, oh, there's a crack at the sewer line where it meets with the city at the road. That's going to cost you $22,000, and you need to get an approval from the city. By the way, the law requires that you give 60 days notice to the supposed moving in tenants that there's going to be things that are going to get done. So he fights through that. He gets in another inspection. Once he gets another inspection, they say the sidewalk has tree roots, and those tree roots are damaging the sidewalk that the city owns. So you need to pay that. By the way, there's a 60-day approval process. And what ended up happening is he lost almost $100,000, and he had to pay government-approved lenders, companies that work with the government, that have special access to the government, as he was bled and dried of almost 6 figures and no rent. And this is an expedited program. This is how welfare actually works, is that it is designed to enrich people's political donors,
when I was
designed to
out of
enrich
Go ahead, go ahead.
systems,
Just real quick.
designed to enrich the wealthy so that we can create bullshit affordability programs that don't help the poor. And that's why we're spending $1.4 trillion and poor people are still fucking poor.
When-
This is a
when I was out of
feature.
work-
It is meant to
Okay,
create
dog.
Hold on,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go ahead, wait.
No, if he's going to tell a story, I'm going to tell a story. When I was out of work, right? If we're going to do anecdote
Story
ending
time?
here, right? When I was out of work before I joined the military, right? There was a period of time I'd gotten fired, laid off from my job, not fired, right? And I was out of work for a little bit. Thank God that they had unemployment for me in the state that I was in, so I could pay a little bit of my bills and get through that time and get back on my feet. The idea
Who pays
that
for
it
that
was
unemployment, by the way?
specifically designed
Yeah.
to destroy white
He
people.
paid for it.
Low
Who pays for that, by the way?
Right, is
Who pays for it?
insanity. It is
Who
not
pays for that?
fact. In fact,
Who pays
and
for
we
that
have
government
a
program?
Hold on, let me
of
finish.
Voters.
welfare actually
pays for that
helping
program?
people get
The
through.
voter.
I am an example of welfare.
Who pays for that
helping
program?
Let him finish.
get on their feet, right? But we're not
Who pays
here
for unemployment?
to talk about the welfare state. We're here to talk about
I'm here to
whether
talk
or
about the
not
welfare state. Who
Democrats
pays
Well,
for
are
it?
to
let me-
blame for fraud,
Well,
and specifically
for
through
it?
the lens
Who
of
pays for it?
Minnesota.
so let me
Who
let me
pays unemployment? Who pays
The
unemployment?
voter. The
The
voter.
taxpayers.
I mean, I
No.
was there.
well, so
No, the business pays unemployment insurance. That is money that is taken out of your paycheck every single time that you get a paycheck because you cost payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, and a whole bunch of other taxes in order to hire you. You could have been making $6, $7, $8 more an hour that entire time and actually saved money, gotten into a better position, and been better off in your life.
Well,
the
I'm glad
employer is
that it
paying
wasn't
for that.
hold on. Let me
I would've spent it, and I'm
move it.
glad that the state held that money back, and I voted for those benefits.
You're saying you're retarded with your money?
Governed is
Hold-
important.
You're saying you
and I
couldn't have
consented
used
Well,
that money
hold
more
on,
effectively?
hold on. So here's the okay. I get that there is the greater conversation. Actually, I think Wick actually said this in the opening about like wanting to be attached to more things. But I think that there's more direct link for like what these conspiracy people are saying, right? I'm gonna post a couple links right here in the group chat. This is gonna be one of them. So Minnesota is also under fire for their voucher voting system, right? And
Yeah,
they're also
I
under
brought that up.
yeah, I believe you did. And they also are under fire because Trump, like I guess, lost Minnesota by 139,000, and now according to public records and some election official, allegedly there's 193,000 duplicate votes, and so now they're opening up an investigation into voting. And I actually looked, and apparently this has been an ongoing issue. There's a claim that in 2022, 583 votes were the deciding factor in a local election, and there ended up being
Like I
some
said,
duplicates.
you don't need
Yeah.
fraud.
So,
you just
but-
need the
but-
government programs that
my-
the Democrats created.
Well, hold
to
on.
fuck over the middle class.
The point that I'm making, and I guess I'm making for the people that aren't here, and I guess that I wanted really to talk about with this panel, is there seems to be some kind of connection between the money going out to the NGOs and then coming back to the Dems, and then potential voting fraud and like why these people are coming. Do you, Ali, do you or Wick see this as a potential thing? Because I know like Fabi wants to talk about the welfare, and that is appealing to me, but. Like, if we're not going to talk about the welfare, do y'all see, like, this grand conspiracy? Do y'all see the potential that this is happening?
Well, can I just ask you,
Sure.
like, how much kickbacks did the Dems get in your mind, like monetarily, from all these fraudulent organizations? And who got those kickbacks? How much were they? Can you show me the numbers on these?
Yeah, I could find a click, but yeah, it's
I think,
thousands.
A lot of it was
I think
brought
it's
up in the
more-
congressional committee.
yeah.
A lot of these people got hundreds of thousands of dollars from the same people. Specifically the oh god, what was it? The
Is it PAC money?
no, not it. It was the fuck. What is it called?
Yeah, to be clear, what I'm asking
Feeding
for,
our future.
Yeah, I got you, Wick. I
Right,
got
the
it. Just give
feeding
me a
our
second.
future that got
He
prosecuted.
wants to know which Democrat is
$50
benefiting
million
from the,
that
from
they
the
did in
scam.
fraud.
to be clear, the
And
Democrats
local politicians got
prosecuted
over
them.
$100,000.
35 million
Democrats
is from the daycares. Is the one here. I have the
were
clip.
the
Look.
ones who brought this to the federal attention, and the Democrats were the ones that prosecuted them. So if the Democrats are getting kickbacks from them, it obviously didn't stop them from stopping the Feed Our Futures fraud.
You do realize that Democrats aren't one person, right? That there's multiple people. There's going to be some
Neat.
Democrats that give a fuck
Interesting.
and care about fraud
So maybe
and want to
we should
investigate
only
things. And
go
then there's
after
going to be
the
other
who are
Democrats.
engaged in fraud and not try to paint.
Do you think you made
the
a bright
broad
point
brush
here?
of the Democratic
Literally
Party.
no one.
Thanks for making my point, you fucking retard.
I think
Jesus
you might be the
Christ.
retard here.
Talk about
No one
Somalian
here
level
is
IQ.
arguing.
Here we have a good example of it.
It's
I'm
literally
way
the,
smarter than you, Wick. Come on. Let's
Not
be
in
real.
So it
any
is-
world,
it is
in
the
any
prompt,
shape,
right?
way,
The
or
prompt
form.
is
You have
should
never
Dems be-
demonstrated that.
Brother,
You have never shown
brother, you
that.
are the
You've
midwit
lost
of
every
All right,
midwits.
listen.
argument
So
you've
Come
ever
on.
hold on. All
had.
right,
You
I
haven't
don't
lost
tell
every
you.
single argument.
all right,
In
all right,
fact, you're
moving on. So,
reaffirming
look,
that Somalians have low IQ.
all right, let's go to.
You're
let me-
fucking conceding
go
the
to-
point that they're
let me go-
fucking functionally retarded.
Let me go to Ollie. I don't care so much about the who's without it combo. Listen, we're all without it. Anyway, here you go, Ollie. Go ahead.
I think the most likely is that it leans towards like for votes, right? You bring you have the NGOs that go and they find these people and they bring them in, and you know, to Fabian's point, American elite want a immigrant poor class to control in America, which to an extent doesn't that just make
It's just adding
white
to it.
people-
That's not my point. Just be
Yeah.
very clear.
Oh, okay.
Like they want a poor class that loves.
but it helps that
social
if a lot of them are
programs.
immigrants.
Well, I mean,
Can I jump in
if you're
here?
trying to, like, it doesn't. It's not like there's like some fucking dude with like a a big Jewish nose rubbing his hands together, creating this whole thing. It's a matter of
Wait, I've
Well,
incentive.
no,
seen
that's
that,
what
right?
that's what Gibbs
If
that's
you-
what Gibbs'
if you-
friends
right,
are
like,
saying.
It's like if you are a Democrat, right? You are a socialist, right? Like there's no such thing as a Democrat that isn't a socialist, obviously.
Well, Republicans
when
are
you are a
socialists too in
socialist
your
Democrat,
eyes.
most Republicans would be socialists, correct?
That's
the
just, as
overwhelming
long as we
majority
have
of
that caveat.
Right. They
Yeah.
love so you are vote
He's
you are
Trump's
a
socialist.
representative of the party that wants more social programs, that wants more NGOs involved,
Yes.
right? That wants
Yes.
a bigger government to help the poor, etc. It is in your best interest to do two things: to enrich yourself and create connections with the wealthy elite so that you can have
Yeah.
more power and more money. And it is also within your interest to do whatever it takes to have a large base voter class that is interested in social programs. And so if that means giving it to immigrants, and that means there's more people that can in a few years vote for you, that's the incentive, right? It's not like they're like, how can we absolutely get the Somalians here? It's like, how can we get low IQ poor people to want more and more social programs that end up having big kickbacks to all my NGO, wealthy people
Abe
that run
Lincoln
these
wants the
programs.
Hold
slaves
on,
freed
hold
for the
on.
vote.
We're getting-
I get
We're
the
getting
point.
1% of the vote. Libertarian take up 60% of the talking time. So to go back to what Gibbs is actually talking about here, these donations.
Sorry, I'm in teacher mode. I'm just trying
Why-
to educate you guys so you can understand what's going on.
Nobody's going to vote for it either way. We want our social program. But anyways, going back to these kickbacks here, like I don't see donations as proof of guilt. You're going to have to show me there was some clandestine meeting to say that this is something that was worked out. Because these groups, if the fraud was unknown by the politicians, of course they're going to donate to the politicians that are saying they're going to continue to fund
No
them.
one working there.
Like-
No one working there was thinks that the fraud was unknown. Like
We don't know
everyone
that
knows
yet.
that fraud is rampant in this system.
We
It's
just
literally-
don't
and
know
We
that
know that. We
Omar
all know
and-
that. You know that. You're lying right now.
I'm not lying. We don't
You
know it.
you know
because
that
we have
everyone
proof.
that has been. You know that
I
everyone that has been
speculated.
that has
Grid, you're looking
that had
great, by the way.
that had power to
Yeah.
and had authority and was supposed to be in charge in some capacity of tracking this shit knows that. By the way, knows that these places were also involved in PPP fraud loans.
That's
Right? Like, there's
speculation.
several
at this
daycare
Everyone
point.
centers
was
that were
involved in
taking PPP loans.
We're
Right,
speculating.
well,
I
we brought
agree
it
with
up,
you.
but it ties to this as well, right?
We
Like
just don't have
we
that
all know.
proof yet. We don't have that
we don't
proof
have
yet.
we don't have proof that a specific daycare place is engaged in the certain amount of fraud, right? Like we look at the Quality Learning Center and we know that they got investigated and then got their license back like 20 times. You can go just look on the Minnesota website. And we know that legally, they are not legally allowed to operate a daycare center after 6 p.m. because their license is for normal waking hours. They are a daycare, not in afternoon care program. Their license doesn't allow them to be open from 2 to 10
That's
p.m.
inaccurate.
But-
You're misrepresenting it. These are
I'm not misrepresenting.
these
Do
are
you have proof of that?
example hours. They aren't firm, hard, fast requirements.
In
There is a
fairness,
specific licensing for afternoon care programs. They're not licensed for that. They're licensed for
Ilhan Omar.
normal waking hours, which is from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we
Ilhan
know that,
Omar-
like,
Those
that
are
their
the
paperwork.
examples they
That
give
doesn't
of
mean
normal waking
that doesn't
hours,
mean
to be clear.
that doesn't, okay, yeah, but 2 to 10 p.m. is not that when there is a license for that, which is afternoon care. That being said, that doesn't prove that they're fraudulent. It just proves that, like, maybe if the most charitable interpretation is that they're like retarded to the point where they can't
Incompetent.
get a sign that says
Well,
quality learning
well,
center.
hold on.
And so
What
their
we
like
know,
paperwork's all fucked up.
What we know is Ilhan Omar wrote the Meals Act, and Ilhan Omar wasn't born here. She's not one of those intelligent Somalis in the first generation. You know what I'm talking about? She's one of those inbreds with that fucking 60
Well, hold
IQ
on.
or whatever you guys are talking about.
I want to like come back to this voting.
Probably smarter than
I
the
want to come
typical
back to this
Somalian,
cash that's being flowing out of the daycare
Because her
centers.
family were,
Hold on.
were wealthy elite
We'll
in
come.
Somalia
Listen, we'll come
that
back to
committed genocide against their own people.
We'll come back to
Oh,
Ilya.
so she's probably higher IQ
Hold on.
than
Hold on.
typical Somali.
We're gonna talk about Ilya more
Maybe.
in a moment. All right, that's fine. We'll come back to that. I do want to focus on what we're talking about right now, though, which is, do we have a problem? And like, I know I personally have a problem if it was a Republican or a Dem, since we're doing this little thing. If I got government funding for my business, and then I turned around and I was spending that money on political campaigns. Like now, I agree we haven't fully approved this yet.
It's a corrupt incentive
but
structure.
yeah,
It doesn't
but it
necessarily
does.
prove fraud.
What?
I'm saying it's a corrupt incentive structure if you have businesses that are potentially engaged in fraud and getting, or at the very least getting a ton of government money, and then some of that government money goes to the very people that are supposed to investigate whether or not they deserve that government money.
Yeah, that's called. Hold on, that's what we. You know what we call that? That's called a protection racket. Right, you go down there.
Yes, government is a protection racket.
Yeah. Like, wait, hold on. I don't. Hold on. I like if I'm in the mob. Let's say I'm the cartel, and I open up a business, and I say you're gonna give me $1,000 every fucking month, for protection. That's one thing. That's different, right? But there's no fundamental difference
That's what
between
taxes are.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sure. I guess you can say, but there's a difference between hey, we're gonna cut you this kickback, and then I'm gonna turn right around and I'm gonna donate $1,500 to like 15 campaigns, so that y'all can get elected. Like that seems like there's a systematic, like in place system that this is what like these people that voted for Bernie originally and voted for MAGA now. They're saying that there's been a uniparty that's been sitting here and has been like a deep state almost. And like I don't agree with this idea that it is, but I do see this idea that there are like structures in place that keep these people in power that are illegal. It seems like.
It's what George Carlin said, right? You don't need.
It's all this innuendo is we all know.
So
You
it's
can't
like
really
what George
prove
Carlin
it.
said.
There's no really
You don't
evidence
need
for it.
a conspiracy
we're
when
just
like
gonna say we
interests
all
align.
know. Nudge,
right?
nudge, wink, wink. Like,
Well,
show
no,
me the
so-
evidence, and we can prosecute it. We know we can because Biden's DOJ.
You
did
don't give a
that.
fuck about
they got
fraud.
Actually,
Stop.
prosecuted.
Let's stop being
They
silly.
got actual evidence. They went forth and did actual investigations. They did actual court proceedings, and they actually got convictions. All this innuendo bullshit is just that bullshit. Give us facts, give us figures, give us connections, make those connections
So
for us.
hold on.
Show
Do you
us
think
your
a
work.
thousand? Do you think
Don't just
a
say
thousand
shit.
federal agents should
So
go in and
wait.
go through all of
So
the
wait. Is that
paperwork?
the same standard we have for Epstein?
Do you think Trump? Do you think it would be a
What
good
was
thing
this?
if Trump sent in 1,000 federal agents to go through all of the
Well,
paperwork
If you
at
have
the government
evidence,
level?
investigate it. Whatever it takes to investigate that, I'm for.
Well, the reason I brought the
Awesome. So you
No, hold
support
on, the
that.
reason
But
I-
again, I'm gonna. He interrupted me, so I just want to
Interrupted you,
say,
brother.
You don't.
You're going on this directed, extended cut Lord of the Rings fucking rant. We're not here to watch your fucking movie. We're here to have a
You know why
discussion.
Lord of the Rings?
Plus, we
Lord of
wanna
the
have a
Rings is so
discussion,
long
and you
because it's so
filibuster
good.
constantly because you're in
Right,
teacher
I'm just
mode
so
with
good.
your-
That's why
Let me
I'm going so
hold on.
long.
All right. Enough.
So again, if you
Enough.
just shut the fuck up,
Enough.
if you just shut the fuck up, I'd get to it real quick. I get it. You're not here to have a discussion of any
I'm here to talk
merits
about
other
fraud
than
and
your
Democrats.
defense
and you're
of
bringing
the
up
of
Somali
fraud.
IQ.
So, anyways, yeah,
Jesus
Somali IQ is a
Christ.
big
All
part
right,
of this
you got-
discussion.
you
But
got, like-
regardless,
you got, like,
I just
30
want to say
seconds.
this again. It's like George Carlin said, you don't need a conspiracy when like interests align. Just because these people are donating a bunch of money to Democrats doesn't necessarily mean that there is collusion. It is in the interests of the Democrats to not go after the people that are funding their campaign. And it's in the interests of the people that are doing a bunch of fraud to give money to Democrats so that they feel like we're buddy and so that they feel a certain way. You don't actually have to have a smoking
Sure, and it's
gun
in
of
the
like
public
a
interest
meeting that
of
they had
opponents
to
of
send an
Democrats
email
and
and being like,
opponents of these
you give me
people
this much
who
money
make
and I'll
shit
protect
up.
you.
Okay. Go.
What is being made up? What is?
I
don't know because you haven't said anything of substance. You haven't given me anything
I've
to
said a
chew
lot.
on. It's all vagaries.
You've
given me vagaries.
Let me.
You sure have.
So you don't deny the numbers that I've given on welfare?
You haven't given me any numbers.
I have. You argued against.
Okay, what
them.
are the numbers you've given me?
The $1.4 trillion and the $70,000 to every poor family and the
that has nothing
redistribution
to
of
do
that
with
instead of
fraud.
welfare programs.
That's
Absolutely
you
it
about
does.
the welfare state. I'm not
Absolutely
here to
it
argue
does.
about the
Well,
welfare
It has
state.
absolutely everything to do with fraud. Because
All right.
if there was no fraud
Advantage of them.
whatsoever and there wasn't kickbacks and all of these corporate fucking things and vendors and bureaucracy and it was just money, guess what? We wouldn't have any fucking poor people, would we?
He's
If they were all
making a-
making six figures.
Hold on. Let me.
He's making the
All right.
big point with the bad
All
money.
right. Let's go back
That's
to.
all.
I want to move back though. Because I personally don't know if I believe it's some grand conspiracy and everybody's involved. I do think that specifically Minnesota, it looks like they set up some kind of corrupt Tammany Hall kind of thing. What is the level of evidence or that we will need to say let's prosecute Tim Walz or let's talk about Ilya Novars.
I'll give you
Go
something
ahead.
clear. I'll give you something clear. If you can show an email chain or any kind of written or verbal communication between Tim Walz and the people who were investigating at the state level, and he was turning them off the investigation, right? And if he was saying, don't look into this, if he was impeding them, if he was firing the people who were engaged in the investigation, or if you found out that he was trying to help the individual companies or NGOs or what have you, or individuals to get away with the fraud, and by giving them advice and saying, hey, heads up, there's an investigative team coming here, then okay, sure, great. Let's go for it, right?
And his
There's
Cash
probably
App link.
also other lesser things that I might accept that I'd have to think about it for a little bit, right? But it's not hard and fast.
What if
But
the
what I'm
internal
asking
memo
for
is
right
true?
now is anything.
What if the internal memo is true? Would that be a problem for you?
Which one? Which internal memo specifically?
So, John Kennedy brought this up in an earlier hearing, right? I don't know if it's true because they didn't give me the fucking memo. According to Kesa Megan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a Somalian name. I have fucking no idea. Saying, quote, there was an internal memo at the Attorney General's office that says, quote, there is a perception that forcefully tackling this issue would cause political backlash from the Somali community, which is a core voting bloc for Democrats. If that memo is true, right, and that they are hesitant to go after fraud because it would be perceived as an attack against the Somali community because they know the fraud is rampant in the Somali community specifically, would that be an issue? Do people need to be at the very least fired for that?
That obviously
Yeah,
is
that
an
sounds
issue,
bad.
but does that prove, or is that evidence of them helping the fraudsters, or is this evidence of them being scared of being accused of racism in 2020?
Well, that negligence, if they're empowered to be the ones to prosecute
Sure,
and investigate
there's
it
a different-
because of their
there's
fear,
different
would be
standard of-
helping them.
There's a different standard of
Right?
accountability that I give to someone who's actively engaged in looking the other way because they
For
know
sure.
that
My
fraud is going
argument-
on, versus
Yeah,
someone
for
who
sure,
is scared to go after something because they might be accused of being racist. I think that
Well,
both
they
are
would
bad,
know that the fraud
to be
is going
clear.
on, right?
I think that both is bad, to be clear. And if that memo is accurate and true, they
Mhm.
do deserve some condemnation for not going forward.
Well,
with that.
why wouldn't you
But
just
when
say
they-
it's
they
because
did-
My argument
real quick,
isn't necessarily that there's
if I
a
may
huge
finish my
conspiracy.
point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We know that the Biden administration on a federal level did go after these people and did prosecute them and did hold them accountable. So it didn't seem to stop the overall arc of justice here. That's all I'm going to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say and again, this is why you were saying well, you're tying it to welfare, et cetera. That's why I'm tying it to welfare. And the reason that I'm tying it to the overarching program is because my argument isn't that I have any smoking gun that Tim Walz was involved in a corrupt scheme of getting kickbacks for political donations to intentionally allow fraud to continue. What my contention is that the negligence and these voting systems, as Tyler put forward, right? That it's a feature, not a bug. That these massive government programs with limited oversight, where people are afraid to fucking go after people because they think it might be racism or it might hurt them in the next election if they go after specific communities,
Incentivizes
is
fraud.
a means by and the process of all of the corporations that become, the specific lenders is the real fraud. It's fraud that's legal. That's the real problem, that the entire system is incentivizing fraud to some degree and is stealing our tax dollars for an incredibly inefficient welfare distribution system that harms everybody.
So I would like to maybe let's just take this as a hypothetical here. Like, I'm
If it's legal, it's not fraud.
I'm basing this off of actually our shared chat here.
Well, then Hitler did nothing wrong, right? Because it was legal. Like,
Jesus
no,
Christ.
like you can
Well,
have
he didn't-
things that are
he didn't
wrong
Well, hold on.
give him a
that the
fraud.
government
Hold on,
does,
hold on.
and they
Can
say
I-
it's
can I
good.
give
Go
you-
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me. So, and this just came out in the I believe it was the House hearings today. I believe. Let me just check my notes here.
It's like 4 hours almost.
The House meeting today. There's testimony from people in the state government of Minnesota who showed. They didn't say. They showed that Wall's government. Now, obviously, we don't know if Walls himself did it yet. Because they haven't gotten that far, but it's his government. Backdated
The lieutenant governor was connected to a lot of it.
Yeah, $680,000 to a grantee. That's somebody who applied for money without evidence that any work was performed or ever would be performed, which means that that's fraud. And they knew it was fraud because there was no evidence that anything had happened. They just rubber stamped it. What would you say,
that
Rick?
fraud?
Is that
Or is that just gross negligence? Right? Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be
I mean,
fraud.
come on. I mean, no, that's kind
That's
of
what I'm saying, though. Like, looking the other way and
I'm asking,
incentives is kind of the
what Rick
system.
thinks about that, because to me that's fraud. To me, that's that's not
So,
incompetent.
just
You
to be clear,
willingly
are
signed
grants
it.
normally applied before the work is done, or are grants given after the work is done? I know scientific grants get some money before they do the work, right?
With a grantee, I don't know if it's a grant per se. It's it could be some kind of loan.
Okay.
It could just be.
Well, my
you know,
answer depends
yeah.
on what type of financial transaction there were, because I know scientific grants, you were given the money in order to do the work, right? You were given the money, then you go through, you get do whatever it is that you're granted out to do, and then you present the findings, right? So in the case of them giving the money and then no work had yet been to be performed when they were given the money isn't necessarily evidence of anything to me. It would depend on the type of financial transaction that took place, and I just don't know.
Right,
Well-
right.
well-
So I guess
That's
the
not
important
how
part,
those
which
work.
I missed, and my chat is screaming at me about, is that, well, I mean, I said it, I just didn't call attention to it, is that money was backdated, which meant that
Yeah,
they applied for the grant at one point.
They changed records.
they
afterwards
changed
upon
records.
federal
let me
which is a crime in and of itself.
let me try this, because I
Well,
think
if they do a crime, prosecute.
so. Well,
crimes.
that's interesting. So here's my thing, right? I'm sitting here listening to this, and let's just run a hypothetical, right? So Walls, let's just say Walls ends up being guilty of a litany of crimes. We know we don't have the evidence yet, but let's just say they're starting, and in 2 years they find a bunch of evidence. I guess we're at two places, and this is really to my Dems first, and then y'all can answer. So what happens then? Y'all basically just ran Walls as y'all's VP candidate, right? And this is the second highest office in the land. You know, they basically, he's presiding over all this fraud allegedly. Let's see if he gets convicted. What does this say about the Democratic Party? One, if
Brother,
this
I
guy,
don't
hold
wanna
on,
go down this line.
hold on. I do want to go down this line. I'll tell you why at the end. Is it that he's so incompetent that, you know, this all happened and I was watching, he didn't get it, and the Dems were like, oh, we're purposely going to put somebody incompetent in there. Or B, that he was openly fraudulent and they knew, and basically they just are in cahoots, right? Because they benefited. And the argument, the reason I'm bringing this up is because for many years now, we've heard about Trump and all his alleged corruption. And so I've heard from the Dems, and many times, just in the chat today, that, oh, any Republican that supports MAGA and all these, hold on, I've seen these things all in the chat right here, and they say, oh, you know, Republicans, they need to abandon their party, MAGA is a new party, Republican Party's gone, they've fallen by the wayside of this nasty thing. Would that mean that the Dems now need to become a new party? Like, do they need to just, like, gut the system? Like, you know, what does this mean? Is all the Dems
and I'm
corrupt
going
at
to
that
take a
point?
brave stance here.
Okay,
that
go ahead.
Both parties have serious issues that they need to get sorted out. The weird kind of, if Tim Walz is guilty, in a world where Tim Walz is guilty of all these crimes, do I think he should be prosecuted? And do I think that the Kamala Harris's vetting team failed? yes, in that world where he is guilty of all these crimes, I think both those things are true. My question is, I don't know if we live in that world because I haven't seen evidence of this yet.
Not to defend the Democrats too much, but can we also recognize that like the last presidential election in terms of like the Democrat Party's normal process of finding candidates was a complete and utter shit show? Like
Yeah, fair, totally
the
fair.
failure
Yeah,
really
yeah.
does stem from them being like Biden's going to be the one running, and then like realizing that it was not going to be
No,
possible to have him run, and they just slapped
Okay.
together the like
I-
you know
well,
the random
hold on, but
candidates.
Fair enough. I will
Fabian, the problem
grant
I
it.
have with that is and the problem I'm hearing from like people that like I talk to regularly. They go, oh, well, the reason why they struggled is yes, because they didn't go through their system. Just like when Bernie ran, it was 2016, and they had the superdelegates to go shut him down. And go, no, we want our establishment guy. Right, and then they're saying, well, they didn't have a chance to find a
That's
new
kinda
established
good.
guy. Well, right, sure, but they're saying we didn't have a chance to get our new established guy, so they put puppets in there like Walls, who was clearly in cahoots with the fraud. Like that's the argument they're making, and they're saying that there's some sort of establishment within the Dems that's evil. Like I like, you know,
I don't really want to
yeah,
go down
it's-
this road too
Hold on,
far
hold on.
because it's too far away from the topic. But
Yeah,
I thought it was
Sure.
actually insane the way that they picked the Democrats. I actually really thought that they were going to run like Buttigieg and Newsom, but then again, neither one of those wanted to run with Kamala. They didn't want to be attached to that. They all both have plans to run for president in the future, and they're smart men. And they said, "No, we're not gonna nuke our entire fucking career for that." And that's
Let's
so
be
I don't
honest.
want
Let's
to
be
go too
honest.
far down this.
Well, I,
They,
just,
they,
just
they went
to
away
be clear,
from
do we have
Shapiro so
evidence
that they could
were
be like,
asked to
so they didn't have
be-
Jews. Like they
do-
were like,
do we
oh
have
fuck,
evidence that they were asked to be
we won't get
VP
we won't get elected.
candidates? But again, it doesn't matter. It's off topic. You're correct, but I don't think we have, other than Shapiro, which there is some evidence that he was asked and turned down. I don't think Newsom or Buttigieg were asked, but I
Yeah.
could be wrong.
It probably should have been Shapiro, but then they were too worried that the
Well, if it was Shapiro,
the
she
Palestine
would've won.
people
if
wouldn't
she
have
was
voted.
turned down, I doubt they
Anyway.
tell the world. I asked everybody, but going back to what
Well, I mean,
James
at that
is
period
asking
of time,
here,
they had meetings with Newsom.
Hey, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah.
Sorry about
so
that.
going back to what you're asking here, I kind of forgot the question listening to everybody talk.
thank you, appreciate it. All right,
If
let's.
Waltz is guilty
Control.
of this crime
Yeah,
in 2
okay.
years,
2 years.
you know,
Okay.
was it negligence,
No.
and then they were running an incompetent guy as a VP,
Okay.
or was it that he's
Yeah, I guess like my
Nobody
question
will
is
give
like
a
how much widespread fraud attached to like leading Dems will it take before like people are gonna say
Nobody
it's
will
the
give
party.
a fuck. One, the Democrats are trying to forget that whole Kamala Harris thing happened. She's fallen by the wayside. She said she was running for president. Didn't even hit the fucking media. I had to go look that shit up because it didn't hit a single news site. So nobody wants to remember Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They want to just move on from that era and the time that they overruled their own primary vote and put up some woman that couldn't speak publicly. So I don't see that ever taking an impact. On top of that, I don't think hypothetically if we get this rare instance where we actually get the guy at the top, Tim Walz was a nobody before that whole Kamala Harris thing. The only thing that's made him popular was running for VP. I don't think it hurts the party at all. He's gone. He's off the face of the fucking planet now.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that. I think that if enough
Fair enough.
evidence comes out, I think the Dems don't mind having Tim Walz fall on his sword.
Who the fuck's that
I mean,
weirdo?
obviously they don't want him. Obviously they don't want that. What I would say though, again, is how corrupt are the Dems? As equally corrupt as the Republicans, which is maximally, right? Like again, like there is this weird thing that statists require, this smoking gun of like proof of like kickbacks and explicit communication and fraud, which is just I think is an ignorant view of how government works. Is that again, like I said, you don't need a conspiracy when like interests align. Right? You're a big corporation. You go to a local politician. You donate to his campaign. You give him a paperwork when a bill is about to come out and say, here's what our thoughts on the bill are. And this fucking doofus that is an expert in nothing, usually. It's very rare that there is a politician that's an expert in anything other than maybe business, and then like the occasional person that's like a doctor, right? Like they're usually constitutional lawyers that have been working in like government programs their whole life. And so they go to this person and be like, the chemical, fucking DuPont thinks this is how the regulation should be on this specific chemical. And then they look and they go, oh, these people support me. They seem like good people. And then their fucking son goes to the same school and they get into Harvard, and then their son goes and becomes a philanthropist.
Yeah, that's how Pork
It's like,
Belly Project works. Yes, we know how
that's
Pork
how
Belly
all
enough.
of this shit works. And what I'm saying is the bigger the government programs are, the more of this happens, the more outright fraud happens, as well as the fraud that we call not fraud because it's not illegal, but it's been made legal. When all these vendors and people get these huge kickbacks, and on top of that, they become like, the government preferred lenders, or they get all this money for limited services. And what I'm saying is that, and I will reiterate this over and over again, no matter how much it annoys all of you, which is this is a feature, not a bug. Okay, the entire system is
100%.
designed to be highly exploitable and to funnel money to the rich and to give breadcrumbs to the poor. And if you genuinely believe that we should have welfare and wealth redistribution, you should just get rid of all of these fucking programs and turn it into a goddamn paycheck. That's it.
Look, I'm kind of on your side there. I definitely feel like that we have far too large a government. We have too many agencies. We have too much money floating around with no accountability. And worse, and this is why I think, and look, Wick knows this, Ollie knows this, we all know this, right? That they make these bills purposefully multi-layered and bury all of this stuff in on page 158 of a 158-page bill, so that you never find it. And say, see, we put it in there. This is legal, right?
Just a small caveat to that. I don't think they're doing that to hide it. I think that they're doing that because it's become harder and harder and harder to pass individual legislation, and so they omnibus everything. And so I think that
we have to
instead of
pass
doing
it to know
in
what's
order
in it.
to hide and obfuscate.
Remember that?
A lot of times,
The thing is, what it does,
if
though,
I can
right?
finish,
Like,
a lot of times what they do is like they put it all into a single kind of omnibus budget resolution or something like that. And that's really the only legislation that gets passed, unfortunately.
Republicans do the same shit. Look at the big beautiful bill, right? Like, or
This,
the one big beautiful bill.
I wasn't separating this from Republicans or Democrats.
Well, that was
I'm
more
not-
to
yeah, I'm
that
not
was more to grid
separating
than
it.
you.
Yeah, I'm not putting it in one camp or the other. I'm just simply acknowledging that that's what happens, even at the state level. Things get hidden.
What's more than that?
Yeah, but hold on.
It's more than that, because something gets hidden. Something gets hidden, and then what happens is they don't actually specify in the hidden thing.
Yeah, except
in the
Gibbs is
omnibus
going to say
exactly how it's going to do.
Problem.
What they do,
No,
what they
that's not
do
what
is
I'm
they
saying.
kick it to the executive.
It is more
They
than
kick
a
it to the
problem, though.
executive to actually determine all the parameters on this shit.
Can we
No,
get
hold-
3
hold
cheers for government here?
Hold on.
Big government.
I want to go. So, like, here's the issue I have with kind of how y'all are taking this. Right? Is in fact, I went on Tim Pool and I argued about fucking Doge with Prime, right? And we sat there, we argued, and I said, this is why we want to.
In retrospect, do you stand by what you argued?
I, in fact, want to triple down is what I'm about to do. In fact, I like fucking went there.
Gibbs eats bullets for
Yeah,
breakfast.
I will.
okay?
I think Doge has still been going and doing shit. I don't know why it keeps doing it here. Now it's learned the wrong things. I sat there and defended it, and I pointed specifically to a case here in San Antonio of a center where they were just like, there's no reason they go, we have to keep these people on staff and they can't work anywhere else. They're paying some of these doctors $200K a year to literally, like, to do nothing. And like, I was like, this is fraud. But people are like, no, it's legal, yada yada. And so I take like a little bit of an issue when y'all go, oh yeah, etc. etc. It's a feature, not a thing. I'm like, no. This is why Doge was created, was to go in there and find all this shit. And then now that we're finding more and more, like, across the nation, now it's like, well,
Didn't it fail though?
it's a distraction from Epstein, or the media's not talking about it, or look who's finding this, Nick Shirley. I'm like, I don't really care who finds it.
Hold on, even if
how
you
much
agree with
fraud did
Doge,
Doge find?
Yeah, even if you agree with Doge,
lot.
like in its conceptual, like I think you have to acknowledge that Doge failed in its mission, correct?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I've met some people that got hired by.
Yeah, but they only
because
found
of
like
Doge.
5% of the fraud they claimed that they were going to.
Which is how much money?
They weren't looking specifically for fraud. They were looking for fraud,
Inefficiency.
spending, The
point with Doge is like it's a start.
Doge had no ability to prosecute.
This is the same problem I have with Republicans. Hold on, this is the same
DOJ.
No, this is the same problem I have with Republicans. When y'all hold on. There's a group
absolutely patently false to say they did not find it.
But hold on, there's a group of Republicans that do the same thing with immigration, right? They go, Trump's low numbers are lower than Obama. Trump's lower numbers are lower than Biden. And I go, well, that may or may not be true, but he built the wall. Now we have nobody coming in. So even if his numbers are lower, he's still working on the problem. Same thing with Doge. They might have promised, billions and billions and billions and trillions, right? But then they're in here fighting something, and they're working on it. And then they're fighting tooth and nail. People aren't. You can't disagree with the fact people are fighting them at every turn. I remember at one point somebody locked themselves in there and burned the records. Right.
Let me ask you this, Grid. Let me ask you this, Gibbs. Sorry, my bad. To me, here's my issue with what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with you that there's a principal difference between somebody scamming, saying I'm running a daycare center with 85 kids in it and there's 12 kids in it, right? And some of those kids are being given cash just to say that their kids are there or some shit, right? I understand that that's different than other things.
Happening?
But what I'm saying is
they're being given money to say
not
that
the kids, the parents
give them their money to say that these are our kids and we're.
I don't know I don't know to what scale it's happening, but it's certainly happening. Right? Is it 20 kids? Is it 100 kids? Is it 10,000 kids? I don't fucking know. We need a full-blown investigation. But do we know that there is kickbacks to people? And do we know that people are being bussed in for random shit? That's happening.
But we do know it, Wick,
just
because
statistically,
it's
pulled
repeatedly.
Listen.
I mean, come on, man.
It's like when we talk about voter fraud, and it's is voter fraud even happening? It's voter fraud always happens. The question is whether or not it's statistically significant to swing an election, right? This is obviously going to happen when there are trillions of dollars almost in welfare programs that some people are going to do those processes. To what degree is it statistically significant? That's a question for the investigation. But here's my question to you, Gibbs, is what is the difference to you, the taxpayer, the person trying to buy become a first-time home buyer, the person that's middle class, struggling and thinking, can we, groceries are getting expensive, rent is going up, I don't have the money this year to be able to start a family. Can we family plan another year or two later, right? What's the difference to that person between a Somalian or a white person, whatever? In Minnesota, it just happens to be fucking 80-90% Somalians, right? That's not who's doing it in fucking California, and there's plenty of white people doing it all over the country too. Some Somalians somewhere scamming the government and getting a bunch of tax money for a daycare center with no kids in it versus a government program for housing that a former fucking congressman that stepped out of the race gets millions and millions of dollars and only builds 80 houses.
Well, I'll tell you.
What's the principal difference?
I'll tell you the difference.
There,
This is actually
it's
easy
both
one.
fraud to me.
No,
in my paycheck.
This is easy, actually. It's very easy, and I feel like Ali's kind of alluded to this before as well. I think y'all are missing the bigger picture. I know it's easy for us to be oh, well, one's American, one's Somali. It's not even that. It's that I think one group of people, when they're sitting here, the constituents that are wanting more of this investigations, they're going, okay, we have been bitching about this for both groups for fucking ever. And now they have evidence of, oh, hey, this group's doing it. Let's start there, and then once we start peeling back the onion, let's see what else is underneath this nasty bullshit, and then we can go after all of it. And so when you're going, what's the fundamental difference? You're actually working against your own cause if you're a libertarian, because I'm not a libertarian. I like us to spend some tax dollars. I like to whoop ass, But if you're a libertarian, you want all this gone. You should be happy they're starting somewhere, especially with incrementalists, because at least they're looking. Because if you find it in one area, you're probably going to find it in other places.
Yeah, the attention is on it, and my intention is to showcase that the government cannot solve problems. They cannot solve the economic calculation problem, and that whenever they attempt to do these things, it always leads towards less economic prosperity for all Americans. That is why I am concerned. You think I give a fuck about good government as an ANCAP? I don't, right? The attention's there, and I'm going to fucking use the time that the attention is there to showcase that this is how the whole fucking system works, and that it's not just some Somalians in Minnesota.
I think Fabian's point is that this is a distraction, right? It's going to be the Republicans are distracting for the Democrats, covering up for the Democrats, right? It gives Fabian's point is that it's the entire government. It's the entire government that's working.
Yeah,
But
I think
also,
what Fabian's
Gibbs,
actually
I'm
saying.
not saying it's a distraction. per
Yeah,
se,
I think
but
what he's
yeah.
actually saying is that right now the attention is focused on
I'm trying to
something
peel
that
back
is
the next layer
a
of the onion.
problem. We were focused on it. It is a problem. We know that this problem is occurring. There's evidence of this problem occurring. Now we don't know who does it. We don't have evidence to put people in jail. Maybe we decide we don't need to put people in
We
jail.
might.
We can just
not.
cut off the funding, or get those people primaried out in the next whatever. I don't honestly don't give a fuck. But we've uncovered this fraud, this pattern of fraud,
yeah,
and it's the thing about this specific fraud that matters to me is that, yes, absolutely, I want anyone involved with it to be prosecuted. But even if that doesn't happen, the scale of it is significant enough that maybe this time next year people will still remember it when the next fraud
When they're in the
item
voting
pops up.
booth, when they're in the voting booth and some politician goes on the campaign trail like Zoran Mamdani, for example, and says we're going to get free childcare for New York City. That is a part of my that is part of my platform, which it was, right? It is my job to go, hey man, that's how this shit works. You're going to get fucked out of your wealth and prosperity if you vote for people that want to put in a bunch of programs like this. That it's less of that money than you think is actually going to go to kids. It's going to go to big business and to fraudsters.
Wait, go ahead.
This is this if I may just real quick. Like I understand that there is never going to be a system that is free entirely and has 0% fraud, waste, and abuse. However, I think that we can limit it as much as we can and still have a lot of these programs to help people in their times of need. I do think that the state, there is a place for it. And just to briefly address this argument, like it has helped me. It has helped my family. It has helped my friends. Is it perfect? By no means, right? Does it not need ever to be adjusted? By no means. But there is absolutely a place for us to have social programs that help our communities. These are not necessarily a bad thing. And I reject the premise that it is built by design with the intent to shrink the middle class and make us all poor and stupid or anything like that.
Scott doesn't think these
Wait,
things
you
are
reject-
bad. He thinks they're
You
evil.
reject the idea, right? I specifically stated earlier that there isn't some hook-nosed person rubbing their hands together that is planning that. What I'm saying is the thing is what it does, and that's what the
Well, yeah. Well, we know it wouldn't be
structure
hook nose because the Dems
creates,
hate the Jews now,
right?
right?
Right, like the Democrats more so than the Republicans, but that doesn't mean the Republicans are free of this. Are invested in a system that denigrates the white middle class in favor of the poor. And of racial minorities as a means of a voting block, and the incentivization is more socialist programs and more waste that enrich their friends and give breadcrumbs to the poor. That is my argument, and I would also say
That's how it's
that
always
when
been.
you say we can have government programs that help, I would argue that that is an impossibility, that there is no such thing as a government program that has ever helped a single person ever. That is a falsity and a misunderstanding of economics and philosophy. It is not possible for those programs to have helped you, because what it has done, it has harmed you first by taking money out of the economy and lowering your opportunities and your wealth and prosperity, and then giving you some of that back. And it is a net negative for you.
If I may, Wick, and Ollie, you too, and even Tyler, I think I know. I think I know our other friend's position. How much fraud, waste, and abuse are you willing to tolerate right now? Do you believe the estimates that it's about 250 million or over or whatever it is?
That's just California.
Tolerate
That's
zero.
just California.
I can't speak for the California stuff.
I heard that it might be over $1 billion. I just don't know that I believe that figure. How much is an acceptable amount so that you can keep you can keep the
As
social
little as
programs in
possible?
place?
Zero.
Possible.
Zero.
You want an actual number?
Zero is correct. Is the correct answer is
Yeah.
zero. That's the
So
best.
anytime
but-
it exists, we need to be strongly policing it and setting examples so it doesn't happen again. These safety nets are imperative, and the people want them. We need to make them work by weeding out fraud and being tough on it every single time, regardless of partisanship.
What percentage of the billions or trillions that we spend on welfare that end up in the hands of large corporations are you willing to accept?
As
I
much
mean,
as the
Are these
people allow from
corporations doing a
owners,
good
really.
job? That's like whether or not the
Yeah, there's
corporations are
multiple
getting
reasons
money
for that.
isn't my issue. It's are they using that money to improve the lives of the community, and to what rate
So-
are they doing that? And we have to look at this
That's
at a
my
case
question.
by case basis.
That's literally my question.
Yeah.
It's
You're
like,
taking
what
10% off
percentage?
the top.
Again, I am
10%
off the
very
big guy?
happy
I think
with
you're
the
good.
Is
welfare
it 10%
program
for the big guy?
that
Because
I
I've heard that
participated
somewhere.
in when I was younger, when I needed it. I am happy that existed. I am satisfied with how it worked. It wasn't perfect.
You
It
have
was a little
Stockholm
annoying
syndrome,
at
bro. They
times,
stole that
going
money
through the
from
hoops
you.
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
had to
Then
Maybe
go
I
gave
think
it
through.
back
that's
to
what
you.
happened.
I found
was
that annoying,
evil.
but it helped me
Wick.
out, and it gave
It's
me
like-
money at a time where I didn't have money.
You got
That was very
paid less
helpful.
money because of that program.
No,
So
that's
grid
not true.
realist-
I would have
yeah,
spent
grid-
that
That's
money on
that
other
is
things,
factually
video
true.
games, all sorts of bullshit.
Yeah,
It
you would
been
have spent
gone,
that money on things
right?
that you
But
wanted.
it's
Correct.
good to have a
And then you would have
safety net
stimulated the
so that
economy.
when you do get into an unforeseen circumstance and you're too young to have much saved up, that you're able to bail yourself out. That's a good
You're
there be
too
an age
young to
limit
have
then?
money
Hold on,
saved
hold on.
up
No, that's a good
because
point.
they're
The world
stealing
is a
half of
better
your
place.
money.
America
That's a
specifically
great
is
point,
a better
Wick.
place
I
now
like your
than it was
point.
before we had these systems.
It's called a
We are
savings
wealthier,
account.
We are healthier. We live longer. We have more wealth. It's just on every metric possible.
Hold
Yeah,
on,
the
Wick,
Industrial
Wick,
Revolution
world
occurred.
than
What
we
the fuck are you
did
talking about?
before the welfare state came into play.
Wick,
Refrigerators have become ubiquitous. That doesn't mean that the fucking government welfare program
every
is
time I
broken.
say
just
Wick, I
saying,
think
it
of
hasn't
women,
hurt us.
infants, and children as the giveaway program. Hey, Wick, let me ask you something. Should there be an age limit then? You just said for the young, it helped you out. Should there be an age limit?
I don't think the age would be the factor that I go. Do I think that there should be some restrictions on who can receive welfare? Sure, right?
Okay.
You can, depending on what program we're talking about, we can talk about like what those restrictions might look to be. But I think that it's very possible
about a
for
time
someone
limit?
in a situation that's like 60 to lose their job and
There
suddenly
is.
You have a time
have
limit. You have a
not
time limit
enough
with-
and through unforeseen factors. And
I
I
kind
think
of want to go
it's
down a
perfectly
rabbit hole
fine
here
to
with,
help them
with,
out. Yeah,
with
Social
Wick and
Security,
Ollie.
but
Well, let me
Um,
answer your question real quick about the
yeah,
about
yeah.
realistically, right? How much fraud am I like?
Yeah,
listen,
yeah.
If people were taking 10% off the top, like your average little scam, your average little fraud, I don't think anyone would care.
2%.
But when you're talking about $9
Standard.
billion in Minnesota, I think that's fucking great. Listen, it's fucking nuts. That's a lot of fucking
it's
money. I
too
think
much.
if it was,
Yeah.
Ollie's
I think
afraid Michigan's next. Ollie's
hell
afraid
no.
Michigan's next.
no, our scams are different. We scam insurances. We don't scam the government.
I mean, hey, a scam's a scam. So let me ask you. All right, so
Everyone's okay with scamming insurance every now and then.
I'm curious
No,
because
That's
this
how you
is
get higher
fascinating
insurance
to me.
premiums, by the way.
Should there be a
scamming.
time limit on how long you can be on welfare or any of these other programs? Because we know,
unemployment-
because we know
Unemployment,
there's
yes.
dozens of stories, hundreds of examples of people who are professional welfare recipients.
Well, hold on. When I was on unemployment, there was absolutely a time limit. I
There's a
only
time
had
limit.
a certain amount of time. I don't
Okay.
remember off the top
Well, you
of my
said
head.
welfare.
They made it very clear to me that I would not continue to receive these benefits after a certain amount
Okay.
of time.
It's how much money you paid
But you
in.
said welfare.
So these restrictions exist.
Yeah, so for welfare, so man, I think the issue is that you are just kind of giving money out directly to people. I don't like the idea of giving people a card with money. Personally, I've always preferred I prefer like Section 8. I think Section 8 is better. Like gives people a cheap place to live that someone is making money off of, right? Or if you want to do like food banks, so if someone was getting food like perhaps delivered.
Yeah, churches and food banks are great.
Yeah, free food versus giving people a card with money. I've actually always hated because I mean a lot of times people either they turn around and sell it or it's just it's just a waste. You're
We've
giving
been
people
down that
cash.
road too with
Yeah,
government
giving
food.
people money just isn't.
We've been down the government food road before. It's not a good one.
I love government cheese. I still
think
remember that when I was a kid.
I don't think
stuff.
necessarily government food, but man, so in the same way that you're giving out like a WIC card, right? You're giving out the bridge card, whatever it may be.
A WIC
If
card,
there was
huh?
like if there was like some fucking process where you go to Walmart and there was an allotment provided for you, right? That type shit.
Yeah, so
I
and
think
the
people
reason
Let me-
so I got to be honest with you. So
You just described food stamps.
yeah, right, food stamp, actual food stamps.
Yeah,
So when I was
maybe that's
younger,
better.
obviously we were dirt poor, and my parents occasionally had either unemployment. There were a couple of times I think my mom was on food stamps, but they were always off of it as fast as they could. You know, pride and all that. And I personally have never received unemployment or welfare of any kind myself. So I always wonder if if I'm jaundiced, if I just don't have that like ability to look at it. So I'm always very curious about how other people view it. And Ollie, you did a great job, man. I really appreciate that insight there. But
We
I
appreciate
mean,
your tax
personally-
dollars as a taker.
I just I don't know. I like when I'm sitting here. I feel like there's more than this. There's smoke. There's fire. When I'm hearing everything
You
y'all
got
are
like
saying.
10 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
By the way, just FYI, so
I got you. So like when I'm sitting here, and I guess last thoughts when we go to closing. What is the likelihood in y'all's minds? Because to me, I'm starting. I used to be pretty far, like not very high probability. To me, I'm starting to move more and more towards. I think that there's some sort of like institutionalized corruption occurring, like within the Dems. I think the Republicans probably had it with the whatever, but I think MAGA has come in and disrupted and created, yeah, probably their own versions of corruption, but not the same institutionalized that has been for a while. And I think we're starting to see it. How likely do y'all think that is? Just like a quick run around the room here.
20.
Institutionalized fraud by like the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the whole NGO system going on.
They're shipping it. They're like bringing people in to vote, and they're giving them a welfare trap, and then they're doing the fraud, and the fraud's like going back to. Because I mean, like, listen, I know y'all are gonna laugh at me, but like Tucker Carlson's about as big as you get. He proposed this exact same thing to Piers Morgan the other day. So like,
well, sure.
There's
I'll ask
20
you. I'll just ask you, and my answer is in the question. Like, given that the Republicans, who are enemies to the Democrats, who do not like them, given that Trump is in the White House
I like you, Wick.
and controls the whole administration, given that he's appointed Pam Bondi, Kash Patel into positions in the DOJ and the FBI, respectively, given that they control Congress, given that they control Senate, if there were evidence of this institutionalized fraud, why have there been zero arrests? Why has zero action been taken on this for Dems specifically as an institutional thing? So if it's like you're asking me how likely is it? Not very likely, because if it was there, absolutely Trump and them wouldn't just be talking about it. They'd be doing something about it, but they're not doing anything.
Or
So
they're
take
involved.
I'll take the exact opposite position.
Yeah, I think
Let
they're
me clarify
involved.
the word fraud. Are you
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
legal fraud, or are you talking just colloquially like a plan to funnel money to the party?
I'm saying it's institutionalized. They're in cahoots. That's what my like premise is
Like,
for
but
this
you're saying
question.
it's illegal, or you're saying that they found a way to do it
They're doing
legally?
both.
Okay, so I think that the latter is more true. We see with these NGOs, like Stacey Abrams' NGO had just started less than a year beforehand and did no work and got like $20 billion, and it was completely staffed with out of work Democrat staffers and Democrat members that worked for different administrations and such. So I think that they are kicking money back to their party in some ways that are probably completely legal, that are written into bills that get passed, like that came from the Inflation Reduction Act. So we can absolutely see that on paper. And if that's what you're looking for, I can show you plenty of examples. But if you're looking for illegal fraud, I think Wick's right. We need actual proof of that, and we don't have it.
So what I'll say is, over the last, couple of decades, the Democrats have absolutely built a system of fraud in terms of, corporations, Wall Street being a big one, NGO collusion, and specifically as I designed the socialist programs that are designed to import people to forcibly integrate, and to have loose immigration restriction while extreme welfare that just keeps going higher and higher and closer to what Europe does. I will also say, however, that the tide is turning, and that without a doubt, MAGA has committed far more fraud than I think probably the Democrats in the last 30 years combined all together. And what I'll say is this, is that over the last couple years, I think with wokeness dying, the national security state apparatus and the intelligence community has shifted from the position of U.S. aid kind of style of foreign institutional capture via woke politics as a means of like spreading democracy throughout the world. And what MAGA, specifically Trump, has done has engaged in the largest fraudulent scheme that we've ever seen in world history, which is acquiring 10% of Intel, having Jensen from NVIDIA, donate money towards his ballroom, connecting Palantir, turning over the databases for TikTok with Oracle, which is, previously worked on another government program with the CIA, so that we can have data centers and capture and control of our media, of our algorithms, and that the government and many of the people of Palantir, obviously working with defense contract agencies, over 3.3 billion as just part of the Intel merger, that what we are seeing is a majority of the global market is invested in AI, and there has been a massive collusion between the State Department, the intelligence community, and intelligence communities around the world, as well as Trump, to enrich himself, his friends, and the new American empire around AI, for election purposes and for political power. So yes, I think what the Democrats do as a means of fucking over the poor and the middle class, but specifically targeting the middle class to create, a kind of like a you will own nothing and be happy kind of, new liberal order, is horrific and horrible. But we're seeing the tide turn a little bit. And I think, the corporate overlords that want to engage in controlling your data, controlling your information, controlling your algorithms is like the next phase of that. And I think that's predominantly Republican led right now.
Yeah. So what? Well, I'm gonna say what Scott said, but what happens is Democrats are involved in blue collar and no collar crime, right? And then MAGA seems to be involved in white collar crime and white collar fraud, because what's happening is
you don't understand it very well. Then
really, no, you don't think Democrats
Wall Street overwhelmingly
in
supports Democrats. Why do you think Wall Street overwhelmingly supports Democrats?
No, I don't mean about Wall Street directly. I'm saying that like Trump has his coin.
White collar crime, NGOs.
He has his coin. He has his $50,000. He has his expensive dinner meetings. He has his the gold Trump card, the immigration card, $500,000 get you your immigrant status or whatever the fuck it is. I'm saying that's like
Trump
that
is a typical fucking
They're doing more
New
highbrow
York,
shit.
Atlantic City fucking
Doing more highbrow
scammer.
Highbrow fraud.
The Democrats are engaged in as much.
Anyway, finish out real quick, and then we're gonna go to closings after you finish, Ollie. Are you done? Okay, yeah, let's go to closings. Oh, it zoomed in again. Here you go. Tyler, start us off with closing thoughts.
I love this camera.
I do too. I like it's like learning, but it's like some hand motions is getting confused. I don't know. It's getting better and getting worse at the same time. Hopefully they'll figure it out soon. But go ahead.
It's an Ozbot, right?
Yeah, it's no, it's something else. What is it? I'll tell you in a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I gotta go take things out here in a second. So I'm gonna go through a couple of things I just never got to because we moved on.
It is an Ozbot.
So what we kind of heard is a rebuke of our current immigration system and our social programs, and we got a long story from California that cost a guy a ton of money. And absolutely, you could cite some pretty bad examples if you're going to cherry pick the bad examples. But for every California high-speed rail system that takes 20 years and billions of dollars that never gets fully built, you can go to Florida and look and see that one get built in 6 years with significantly less money spent. It's just sometimes when you have democracy, you get inefficient people that come in and over-regulate for the climate. That's where a lot of these things actually come from. It's not that the government's bad. It's that the people in that state wanted this specific regulation because they care more about the environment than their pocketbook, which is the voters' prerogative to make. It's not all about just the GDP and money. The welfare state isn't going anywhere. We all know the risks of it. We all know that this thing can exist. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Instead, we're going to police the very low amount of fraud that actually happens in it. The idea that people can do stupid or bad things, and that's a reason to throw out the system, would also say that since businesses fail, we should throw out capitalism, and nobody's going to make that argument because it's silly. So throwing out the welfare system because sometimes there's welfare fraud at very low rates, fine. Now, something that I want to go back to the immigration part too, because something like 80% of visa workers come to the United States, they work, and then they leave. They don't stay here, they don't start a family, they usually send money back home to their family so they can get ahead there, and then go back to their country when they're done. We need people to stay here. We need that perpetual growth. The reason why is because the boomers are now aging up to the generation where we need the government systems to take care of them. As Wick was saying, Most of our money goes to these top generations. In order to get that perpetual growth with the birth rates we have to import people. If we're importing people, they're just working for a few years and leaving. They're not a long-term investment in the country. We're spending money to bring in short-term investments that only help us in the short term. We need compassion-based immigration to get people to stay here long-term. So we bring in some people that Grid would deem as an undesirable. Sure, their IQ is low. Sure, they're a little bit more prone to criminality. Sometimes they eat people's faces. It happens, you know. As the Statue of Liberty said, bring us your poor, bring us your tired, bring us your sick, bring us your inbred. And then after one generation,
You're inbred.
they turn around and they become fantastic citizens in society. They go to college at higher rates. They usually make more money than average U.S. citizens. So long term, they stay here. We build our safety net even bigger because we have more people coming here to contribute.
Fabian.
Yeah, I think this issue of ought we prosecute the Democrats? You know, if we find smoking guns, obviously, like I'm not going to cry about one criminal gang, which is the Trump administration, going after another criminal gang, which are Democratic politicians. I think it's important that we look at this and that this blows things out of the water. And I do look at this very similar to the way that I look at Doge, right? Which is that Doge is largely a failure in terms of finding the amount of money and waste that they said they were going to find. But I think that it helped wake up a lot of Americans to just how stupid our government is. You know, people have a hard time with this potential paradox, which is that the government is maximally inefficient at everything that it does. It's full of fraud, waste, and abuse. It's the dumbest shit that any normal person would be like, well, I'd fix that if I was a manager. And at the same time, they have so much power. And that comes from the power to tax, because you can be as inefficient as you want if you can just take more money to solve the problem. And that's what we're seeing the collapse of the middle class in America because of welfare systems that have gone up over 700% in terms of funding in the last decade. We are watching, our deficit balloon, and a large portion of that, most of that, is due to Social Security. The solvency of the dollar is going to eventually break, and our credit system, as our ability to sell bonds to other nations is eventually going to break. And what we're seeing is we have to constantly be involved in wars to try and maintain tying our inflation, the US dollar, to oil trading and OPEC, right? Why the fuck do you think we invaded Venezuela? Because the American economy collapses if we don't keep invading Middle Eastern countries and invading countries like Venezuela, if we don't fight BRICS so that we have a means of making sure that the entire world has the same inflation rates that we have so that we can prop up this horrific economy. And that's why it's important when we see all of this fraud, waste, and abuse in these systems that we understand that it is a feature, that this is how the wealthy elite and the politicians enrich themselves and enrich their friends at your expense. At the normal person that goes, I've never been on welfare in my entire life, but I'm hearing that these people are getting millions. Like, what the fuck is this? I put forward, as much as I'm a libertarian, and I hate the government, and I hate the state, and I hate welfare, man, we could give every poor person in America, every poor household in America, $35,000. $35,000. Just straight up give them a check. Get rid of all these programs. $35,000 a year on top of whatever bullshit McDonald's job they have, and they would be fine. They would be thriving. They would be okay. And we would save $700 billion. We would save fucking more money than we've ever paid to Israel since it's been a nation multiple times over a year. If we just gave out checks instead of enriching corporations and the corporate elite and politicians and scammers. That is why the government programs do not solve problems. And that is why we should look at these situations of fraud and realize that it's not necessarily, it doesn't need to be corruption for votes, but, against whatever laws are made, but instead that's how the laws are made. They are designed to create a massive welfare state that incentivizes the poor people from other countries with fucked up values and low IQs and high rates of fucking being inbred, that send a bunch of money back home to Somalia, that supports terrorism and causes more wars. And don't worry, if they cause a fucking problem somewhere, the American military can step in and have another fucking war in the Middle East, because it's not like we've stopped in the last 20 years at doing those. And recognize that is how the system is designed. It is designed as a eugenics program to outbreed high IQ and middle IQ people that are competitive and conscientious and keep them from building families and keep them from being able to succeed, and to create a permanent underclass in this country that fights for breadcrumbs. We need to abolish welfare. You'll never solve this problem by prosecuting fraud, because the system is fraud.
All right, thank you so much, Grid.
Oh, okay. I'd made an assumption that you were going to let Wick or Ollie go before me, but that's okay. Yeah. Look. So, Tyler, your closing sucked, man. I got to be honest. While I enjoy listening to Tyler, the points. Look, he's wrong about the percentages. He's wrong about so much, but I'm just gonna point to what the on topic stuff is. First, there is fraud. We know there's fraud. I heard a billion. Ollie said way more, so maybe he's more up to date on the numbers than I am. But even if it's even if it's only $9 billion in fraud since whenever they started, that's too damn much. You know, it's too damn much. What has actually happened is not a eugenics program per se, as my friend Scott pointed out. But what has happened is portions of our government and private industry together have built a machine, a very efficient machine, an industry that steals money from taxpayers on an ever increasing and amazing level. There is no other word for it. It is theft. Nobody actually gets any benefit from that. Everyone who says, well, you know, welfare helped me out. Yes, that's great. It was state run. It wasn't, you know, I'm glad that you as an individual were helped. However, we're not talking about you as an individual. We're talking about companies that get money to provide daycare for students that don't exist, or to provide learning for adults that never go there. And yet they still get all of this damn money that comes from my taxes and Scott's taxes. And I'm assuming Tyler still pays taxes. I don't know. But
You're leaving out Ali, you fucking racist.
well, I have to leave out Ali because he's from
I
Michigan.
avoid as much as I can.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm not even sure Ali admits to being employed, okay? So, I mean, I'm just saying. It's a machine, and it's wrong. And I don't care whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, but I think it's pretty clear in the two states that have been affected the most so far that a lot of it is done with members of the Democrat administration's knowledge. Now, whether or not they were complicit, I don't know. That's for a court to decide. Whether or not they're guilty of an actual crime, not my decision, pal. That's for a court to decide. And if they're acquitted, oh, you know, great, wonderful. But that doesn't change the fact that we know this is happening, we know where it's happening, and we know who's involved. We just don't know how much. Beyond that, I think we've had a lot of like around the poll discussion tonight that really doesn't matter. But it was interesting and I had a good time. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much, Ali.
Yeah. So I guess the more and more I have these conversations, especially with like Scott and then people in like, you know, and against him, in theory, I agree with Scott. I'm not gonna lie, I think he's correct in what ought happen, right? I do listen, I do. But in practice, I kind of align more with Wick, right? I do like my social policies. We do live here. In reality, I'm okay with a little bit of fraud, a little bit of scamming, 10% off the top, keep it clean, keep it light, keep it simple, right? But we do seem to be living in a world where it seems to be increasingly more government against the people. And if that's going to be the case, right, I'm going to start looking into how many daycares I can open up, because apparently it costs fucking nothing. All I have to do is rent a little studio somewhere. That this is, quick, and you don't get in that much trouble if you get caught. So
You just closed down.
just saying, recommendations. Thanks for having me on, Gibbs. I really appreciate it, fellas. It was a pleasure arguing with you tonight.
Thank you so much. And Wick.
Okay, wow, we had a lot a lot of words said, a lot of arguments made. Here's the long and short of it, and I'll do my best to be as concise as I possibly can. I do believe that there was and is fraud in Minnesota that is being conducted. I think that the evidence that I have seen suggests that more often than not, when fraud is found, it is investigated, prosecuted, and stopped. At least that was the case under the Biden's Department of Justice, and we know that they did. One of the problems I have with this conversation is so many people are living in the vagaries. They're living in this vague innuendo. I've asked several times during this panel, can you show me, right? The implication that the Democrats have this industrial scale fraud that they knowingly have set up to milk the taxpayer and to get these kickbacks. If you have evidence for this, by all means, prosecute it. But the fact that they aren't doing this, at least not towards Walz or Omar or any of these big names, suggests to me that they probably don't have any actual evidence. And I don't think that we should be going off of YouTube videos, right? When you have this same group of people who consistently get stories wrong, right? Because they have poor journalist practices, right? We shouldn't be trusting them in order to pull all funding because he made a video. If you wanted to pull all funding because there was fraud going on, and then you decided, well, because of all these things that the Biden DOJ was prosecuted and all these other investigations, fair, but they're not doing that. The JD Vance was saying, oh, Nick Shirley should got a Pulitzer Prize for his award-winning journalism or what have you. It's just silly, and I don't like silly. Look, at the end of the day, if there's fraud, prosecute it. But I haven't seen evidence that Tim Walz is like secretly funneling money to Somali paymasters. So, it is what it is. Wick TV, all platforms. I love you all. And yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. Tomorrow, 7:30, Golden Dome, Golden Fleet. We're going to be arguing about that. I think Bill Burns will be here. And Friday, we'll be on Wix at 5. Should be wild. We're going to be talking about, what are we going to talk about, Wix?
Well, just to be clear, yeah, I'll tell you guys what's going on with that. Because a couple of people here are going to be on that, and it's at 6 Eastern. Just so my viewers aren't confused.
5 p.m. my time.
Yeah.
Eastern is the only time that matters in America. The majority of the U.S. population
Central
is on the East
time.
Coast. Our capital is on the East Coast. The
Central
New York
time is
Stock
Central
Exchange
time.
is on the East Coast.
Anyway, we don't care about
6
this.
Eastern.
Central
6
right there in the
Eastern.
name.
6 Eastern. We're having a Destiny versus Dev. I'm sorry, a Destiny and Dev versus the World panel, specifically on
Ew.
January 6th. The
You
White
still
House.
work with that creep?
Which one, Dev or Destiny?
Destiny. I just like.
Yeah, of course.
You still.
Like,
Oh,
I
man,
would
that's so
work with, I would
pathetic.
work with anyone, right? But
Anyway, let him finish.
regardless, okay.
Oh, it's just sick. It's
On
gross.
January 6th, the White House put out a what some might call fraudulent version of events of what happened on January 6th, including accusing Democrats of being the real insurrectionists. Dev and Destiny had a problem with that and invited all comers to come in and challenge them. And I've invited some of these people, lovely people, to come in and do that. And if you have a problem with it, we are going to at some point open up call-ins during that show, so feel free to get in line. But yeah, that's the.
How long do you anticipate that being, Wick?
Good question. Depends how much energy you guys bring to it. So.
And on that note, we're going to go raid someone I'm going to see in 2 weeks for IRL content. We're going to raid Scott. So y'all be good. Thank y'all so much for being here. It was good times, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Y'all be good. Y'all
And
be
all the
safe.
debaters.
Bye.
See you guys.
Have a good night, fellas.
Give me a second, guys.
And right, all right, y'all be good.
Peace.
I'm going to go get stoned.